I feel like me personally, I could come out in the world right now and start the Tasty Freeze movement. You know, where I'm just like pro Tasty Freeze, and we show up at all the rallies and we're like Tasty Freeze for everybody, right? Like, and we're wearing the shirts. And I think it's only a matter of time. I probably give it like a month, 2 months, depending on how big I get this movement. But say it's 1 million to 5 million strong Tasty Freeze, somebody says Tasty Freeze on a podium. It just happens. You know what I mean? Naturally, you're going to see the shirts, you're going to see the movement, you're going to see it all over Twitter and all over these social media, and you think, why don't I just, like you said, why don't I lump myself in with these guys? It's free votes.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like this. And totally redeem yourself!
Welcome back, Internet, to another episode of 3 Averagely Intelligent Dudes discussing dangerous ideas. What is up? And today, one of the most dangerous ideas I think that we've talked about is going to lead off the show, and it has to do with abortion and the new law that was just passed in Texas, which is banning abortions after 6 weeks. We break down what we think about the law, what we think about abortion in general, what our personal stances on our abortion, and after that, we're going to get into a little being the opportune word, discussion about Joe Biden.
It might be Joe Biden mixed in with a whole bunch of other topics because he's impossible to talk about.
Yeah, we've the last time we tried to talk about Joe Biden, the same thing happened, which is where we kind of talked about it for a second, but there's really not much to talk about because he's not exciting, and so we end up talking about lots of other different things. But it's interesting nonetheless, and we hit a lot of cool stuff, and hopefully you guys like what you hear, and let's get into it.
So, I mean, obviously we got to talk about this topic. It's been just everywhere in my sphere, man. Like,
yeah, every social media I have is talking about it.
Right, yeah, like I can't get on
The internet's
anybody's
very upset about it.
page. Been seeing a lot of memes, abortion memes.
What a great category of meme. We're going to be talking about the abortion law in Texas today.
Yeah, a little nod
We got
back.
some memes for you guys.
A little nod back to last week's episode,
Yeah.
but no, I have been seeing a lot of that about it, man, and it is kind of an interesting law, you know. And then it got to me thinking about how like it's surprising to me this topic hasn't come up on this podcast yet, so it'll be fascinating. Well, welcome to 3 Averagely Intelligent Dudes discussing a woman's body.
Exactly the point that I was gonna make. You killed you crashed that, Joe. It was perfect. But you like hit the cymbal, ba-dum-pa, because I was gonna come in with it. I was like doing the drum roll in my head. I was like, dudes talking about abortion.
When will we say it?
Great time and great delivery.
Great acknowledgement.
So yeah, I mean, definitely take this conversation with a grain of salt, you know, like, I mean, that tends to be the big talking point for a lot of women, is the fact that we have no idea what we're talking about in this sphere. So, I mean,
That was my original stance on the topic of abortion. I was definitely pro-choice in my brain, but I didn't feel like I could come out and say like, I have a strong opinion, because it's not my fight.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I mean, it is our fight to an extent because we're all people, we're all humans, you know, and it's about humanity. But at the same time, I don't have ovaries or the female reproductive system.
Yeah.
You know, I have control of my body.
yeah.
You know,
That's
like
true. That's
government's not making
I can
me,
wake
not
off
making
whenever I want.
Yeah. So it's definitely coming from that angle. But before, I just never had a strong opinion on this. Like,
Yeah.
I'm hoping in this podcast, I kind of get to a place where I can talk about it better.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to be approaching it from 2 different ideas. You know, like, I think that there's the morality of it, of just like whether or not abortions are like a good thing, I guess. And then the legality of it, you know, which I think is separate. Because, I mean, oftentimes, you know, especially me and Mac, like, when we talk about stuff like this, it always ends on, like, we have an opinion, but I never feel like my opinion should be lawfully enforced on other people.
What
know?
everybody else does.
Right, you know what I mean? So that's definitely where I'll be approaching it. Because even as you talk about that, like, what is the right of a guy to be able to be involved in this process, you know?
Well, I wanted to bring that up because you made the joke about how it's like women's bodies and women's making the choices, which is like the main mode of thinking. But I've always felt, I mean, obviously I think that the woman is the one that, you know, she carries the baby. She has to go through the birth and the labor and all that. So, I mean, it makes more sense that we would divert the decision to like, you know, the lion's share of the decision making
She
to
grows
her.
the human.
Yeah.
But you know, without us, ain't nobody getting pregnant.
I mean, because it's my kid too. So,
Exactly,
like, you know
and
what I
that's
mean?
my
Like,
point.
it's-
Is like, yeah, like I get it that the woman has to take into account that her body will be the one carrying the child, but it's also the man's child as well. Like, it's not like the baby's only the woman's until it gets birthed, and then the man has a lot of responsibility.
Right.
Like, the man has some responsibility, and if
Right.
there's responsibility, then there should be some input. I
agree.
kind of look at it the same way Dave Chappelle made that joke about, you know, he was saying, like, you know, if a woman can kill a baby, then a man can definitely abandon it.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, it's if you want to choose to have a child against the will of the father, then the father shouldn't have to pay for it because that was your decision, right?
But does that swing back? Can you as a man be like,
Right.
well, you know, I know you're pregnant,
I
you want
want
to
you
keep
to
that
have it."
baby, but let me get out my abortion laser gun and zap you.
Well, see, and I think that this is where it becomes murky because it's like, well, can the guy really tell? I think that it's an interesting mode. Like, it'll really come down to each individual couple and how they decide, like, who wears the pants and who's, you know, like,
Makes the
who
decisions
wants to
in
have a
that way.
child and who doesn't and stuff like that. It's a very personal thing. But I always felt like just in general, the overall cutting out of the man within this whole conversation is weird to me because I'm like, ain't nobody having abortions without men.
But at the same time,
Straight up.
I think where everybody sits on, or not everybody, but a lot of people sit on it is like, who am I to decide whether or not John Allen has a baby? You know, like, I think that you as a man should have a decision in your child.
Yes.
But the idea that you can regulate
Tell somebody
everybody
else.
else's
Yeah,
children
exactly.
what
Yeah.
to do.
Well, you
is
bring me to a good
interesting.
point I want to talk about, because you talked about these two sides of this issue. It's kind of like the morality, where I lump in religion and all that other talk about this, and then the legality. And it's like, how do you legislate a man's right in a woman's body being altered like that? You know what I mean? Like, it's the autonomy of the human body. Like, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness means, like, that woman, it's in her fundamental freedoms, you know, like the ones that she was born with, to have control of her body to an extent, like basically to the highest extent. And Roe versus Wade, I guess, is essentially what said, like, that's your body, it's your choice,
Yeah.
you know.
What
And
about
now
the baby's body?
Well, that's
that's
the
where we
whole
start.
conversation.
That's where
The whole
science comes in. We haven't talked
conversation.
about science. We said morality and we said legality, and now we got to talk about the biology, like the science of, like, you know, this heartbeat law is what it's known as. From what I understand, I could be wrong here, and I like doing research on the podcast. The machine makes that noise.
Yeah.
That heartbeat noise.
Yeah, when they can register a heartbeat on I guess, an EKG or something.
Yeah, your heart doesn't make beeping noises.
When you're 6 weeks old, your heart's not going beep.
No,
Well, no, when you're 30 years old, your heart doesn't go beep, beep.
But
It
the-
goes, doop, doop,
but
you
the
know,
po- the
and then
point is
and then
it's
the
saying-
monitor beeps when it catches the doop, doop.
Yeah, but it's saying that, like, it's catching a dum dum, when in reality it's not catching an actual heartbeat.
That's kind of what the machine is built to do.
From what I understand, and like I said, we're going to look at a couple articles here, but that's the big controversy here, is, like, it's not actually
So
catching
what you're
a
saying
beating
that-
heart. It's catching growing cells.
No, it's catching a beating heart. That's what I gathered. It
That's,
says,
yeah, you can't monitor a heartbeat if there is no heartbeat.
Okay, so the Texas law, it bans abortion as soon as cardiac activity is detectable. That's around 6 weeks, which is before a lot of people know that they're pregnant. Other states have tried to do this, but those laws have been challenged by abortion right groups and blocked by federal courts again and again. So they're saying, like, it is like when the doctor, probably through ultrasound, I don't know exactly what machine they're using, and we can maybe look it up or just put it here.
We're not gynecologists or anything.
Yeah, but it's that. It's like when they can register a heartbeat.
But it says cardiac activity again. Like, it's like they're being specific because it requires specification like that. Like, to think of it, like, it's almost like you're, yes, this is a human baby, but it's at 6 weeks. And, like, abortion's up to a certain point. Like, I'm not going to get into the minutia because I don't think I should make the law on what constitutes when the cutoff is. But if we're going to all agree that women should be able to have abortions, that's 6 weeks old. That's comparative to, like, a human baby, like what comes out of a woman. This is at a very early stage.
Yeah.
Like, very early stage.
I would definitely, on the science argument, make the fact that, like you said, it's at the very, very beginning. You know, like, at least make it 9, 10, 12 weeks where you know it's a heartbeat. Like
Yeah.
you said, like it's.
Well, you
it's
miss your period. You figure
know,
out you're pregnant.
yeah,
You take a
6
test that's
weeks.
reliable. 6 weeks seems like nothing.
a little too early because you might not be accurate in defining what a heartbeat is. But now I've never heard a 6-week fetus heartbeat, so I don't know if it's very.
Well, that's probably why they say cardiac activity and not heartbeat,
Right,
which I
right,
think
right,
is what
right.
you were getting to. But I mean, obviously, nobody's gonna say this is the cardiac activity bill. Like that
Right.
just sounds whack.
Yeah, because heartbeat really pulls on your strings. And
It's
says,
a-
this
yeah.
is a beating child. Like this is a cognitive child.
It's got a brain.
It's got, you know what I mean? And it's like, I don't know. It's a difficult moral question and a difficult question about, like I said, making the laws. But this science question is even harder because now you're trying to define biologically when can it think? What's a soul?
when
What's
is
a
it
consciousness?
constituted as life?
Yeah, well,
When-
you're
when is
using
life?
science to try to determine when something is an autonomous being and has rights of its own.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because that's, you know, the whole idea is like unalienable rights that are not given through government. They're given through
You're born
the fact
with
that
them.
you're alive or whatever. But when do those rights start?
When are you alive?
Yeah. Like, when does the infringement of a woman's rights on her body start because it conflicts with the rights of an unborn fetus?
Yeah, that's definitely.
Is it at the beginning of cardiac activity at 6 weeks? You know, that's kind of what Texas
some
is
people
saying.
think,
yeah.
Yeah, and then I mean I think it was like on average it was like 24 weeks before this, so I don't know how far into that is in months. I mean, pretty sure that's all the way through the second.
that's 3
trimester.
months.
Yeah,
3 months is usually the
12.
number that I've heard.
So, yeah,
I've also
2 to 3
known it's one
months.
of these things too where it's state by state as well.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're
Very
really
much so.
It
Very
depends,
much so.
which I typically like, you know, more. I don't like the federal government doing a lot of stuff. Like, you know, if you're going to have, that's why I'm not like for this whole like minimum wage raising in the federal sense, like, because $15 an hour, like if you make that the federal minimum wage for everything, then it affects different states differently in the same way that people in different states have different ideas about when life starts and when you should be able to get an abortion and when you shouldn't. And so letting those individual communities make their own decisions seems better.
Yeah, because the federal government's a very large organization. Like you said, when you're talking about the entire country as a whole, I agree. You know, like regionally, it's way different. And so I always like the federal government facing outwards. Like you deal with Israel, you know, deal with China and shit like that. Deal with world economics, you know. But the idea of like turning the federal government inwards and, like you said, regulating each individual state seems tricky because each one operates so differently and has different economics and different situations.
I tend to like when the federal government steps in on like something that is like what they consider like your civil liberty or your inalienable rights or something. Like gay marriage is a great example where they were like, let these people have what you all have. You know what I mean? Like we're supposed to be secular.
Yeah.
And the federal government kind of stepped in. Because before it was only states.
Yeah.
The states had complete control over that.
Yeah. And I mean, like we've talked about it too when we've had, you know, conversations about what size of government is a good government. We do talk about how, like, if left to their own devices, certain Texas governments like Texas or like, you know, Florida, any like radical government or radical more region could really start enacting laws that differ so greatly from America,
or they
as a
just
whole.
infringe upon your rights.
Right,
where the
right,
federal
right,
government has to step in
Right.
and say no.
Right. Yeah. Which a lot of people think is going to happen here. You know, like, I'll tell you this. The one thing about this Texas law is it's super crafty. I mean, it is super crafty. They really went out of their way to design this law in a way that it would pass, that it would have the least amount of, like, friction, you know? So, for one instance, like, that I was listening about and hearing, you know, they're tasking civilians with the upholding of this law, right? So the law encourages, or what it says is like you can sue somebody in civil court for a financial reward.
Snitches get riches.
Right, exactly.
Is
A
what it is,
financial
yes.
reward for turning somebody in if they're involved in an illegal abortion as deemed by this law in any way.
There's no penalty like if you accuse somebody and it turns out not to be true.
Sure.
But there's all upside.
Yeah.
That's not true. Usually in civil court, if you lose the case and you're the plaintiff, you have to pay the defendant's legal fees.
Yeah, I think we should probably keep going through the law a little bit because I'm pretty sure it says that there's no like negative, like they want you to narc, and if you're wrong, it's not like libel or something.
Interesting.
Yeah,
It's never been. I mean, that's just
yeah.
depends. Like if you're in a contractual obligation or something like that. But normally in civil court,
That's true.
that's one of the things that if you lose, you have to pay, as the plaintiff, you have to pay the defendants.
Right.
Because the burden of proof is on the plaintiff. You're
Yeah.
the one making the accusation.
yeah, and if this,
I don't know if the law itself has a provision that says that if, in civil court, if you do lose, we're no longer going to make you pay the legal fees of the defendant. I haven't heard anything about that.
Senate Bill 8, which allows anyone to sue anyone who performs or aids in an abortion, marks an unprecedented change to who has standing to bring a lawsuit. The tactic is also an emerging trend in Republican-dominated states that may compromise constitutional rights. Let's scroll down a little bit, see if we can get some good information here.
Texas's abortion law goes much further. Typically in tort law, which is used to compensate people who have been injured, a person must have incurred some sort of personal harm in order to sue someone else. That's the very nature of what a civil court is intended to remedy in such case. Several legal experts told the Tribune Texas's new abortion law gives that privilege to anyone. Oh, so they were just saying, like, now instead of you being damaged, like normally it would be like the unborn child would have to sue you because they're the one being damaged.
I think the answer to this question is going to take some serious
Oh,
Some
man,
serious
I'll-
looking
yeah,
into.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll
We'll
put
have
it
to-
down here.
I was getting some real good information out of this article, though. That's
Yeah.
good stuff. Like, it's really kind of clarifying there, where it's like, you don't have to be harmed at all to sue somebody. You could be an abortion civil pursuit hunter.
Well,
and
that's
just
what
hunt women.
That's what people are talking about. That it's going to encourage people to become just bounty hunters and just
There's already people standing
stake
outside like
of-
every abortion clinic, like accosting every single person who comes in
Which
there.
I heard there was only like 11 in the state of Texas or something, like as a whole.
I mean, there's
like-
some states where there's only one or two.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, Texas is the second largest country, and it has
Is it?
11 clinics. So it was already
It's the second largest state in our
In our
yeah.
country,
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, but the point being is like, there's literally only like one or two in some of these states. They legislate it down to as hard as possible as they can make it,
Obviously
and now they're
not.
making it even harder.
Yeah. So
I feel like it's an assault on this right that people have, not
No.
just women, but like people. They're people,
100%.
and they have a right to this.
I mean, there's no coincidence that it's coming out of Texas, which is probably one of the most Republican states in the nation. So it's definitely like a way for them to push a political agenda that the Republicans or the right or whatever you say has for a long time. Like they said, this has come up against federal court so many times. I mean, it's the topic of every political debate. So they definitely
Some people
wanted to
vote
see
just based on this issue.
Yeah,
Like there's
some
single
people
issue
really
voters
wanna
that are
see this.
just staunchly like, what are your stances on abortion? Nope, fuck that. And then they're out.
So it seems restrictive, but my thing is, and that's why I said I wanted to approach it from like a morality and a legality standpoint, because like for me, like what like are we gonna talk about our stances on abortion here? Because like I have like a morality standpoint in the sense of, like I said, I don't necessarily. It's tough, right? Like why do we make murder illegal? Like why is that illegal in the first place? And you were talking about it infringes on another person's rights, and so therefore it has to be legislated out of possibility, And so it really starts with that standing of like, is abortion an okay thing to start with? Like we were talking about the idea of like man and woman, but what doesn't come up often is like, what if a woman wants an abortion and the man doesn't? And then the woman gets sole charge of that and can just do that, And so, I mean, my thing where I'm at with it is like that, that's weird, right? Like that's why I said I feel like you get a little say in your own child, but also too, it's interesting. Like, why would we want to force somebody who obviously does not want to have a child? Why would we force them to have one? Like
Carry it to term.
especially as like if the Republicans are the main proposers of this idea and the against it are Democrats, right? But then or Republicans, whatever, they want to see no abortions happen, right? But then you also get salty when there's a bunch of people on financial aid and using government assistance and stuff like that. My thing is, if somebody is incapable of raising a child and you force them to have that child, well, now you just essentially force them to get on some type of government assistance to support this child. And it almost seems like a contradiction. It's like, what exactly is it that you want these people to do, If I'm giving them... Well, I'll give two replies to that statement. If I'm giving the Republicans or the right-leaning people who want to see less abortions, if I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, I would say that they may have made a calculation in the sense of, if you accidentally become pregnant and you're not at a position to take care of it, but they make you take care of it or make you put it up for adoption or something, maybe they're hoping that the struggle through that whole process will be a negative incentive to having children out of wedlock or having children without planning, unplanned children. I don't think that that's what it is, because that's a little bit out of the scope of a lot of these people. I think it's just they're looking at it from an emotional standpoint, as most people do to most things. They're like, I don't agree with you killing a child, even if it contradicts other beliefs that I have about economics, because they're not thinking about economics. They're just thinking about, like, you're murdering babies. And so when you hear about murdering babies, your brain just goes, that's wrong. And so they try to stop it.
That's why people like to refer to this as women's health, because that's what it is. If you force a woman to take a baby to term, you're forcing repercussions on her health that could kill her. You could find out pretty early on that baby's going to have Down syndrome, or a high percentage chance to have Down syndrome. There's a million different things you can go into. There's rape, there's incest, which is something I want to get into. I don't want to get into it here, but that's a big part of this. Yeah, but that's women's health. So it's like, the idea of telling someone you can't abort this baby, you have to carry it to term, is essentially saying, like, you have to take all these health risks. And it's their health. Like, it's because the Supreme Court of the United States is not majority women. No. There's not, if it was majority women, I'm pretty sure women's health and women's rights would be upheld and protected at the federal level.
I don't know. A lot of people are saying that Justice Amy Coney Barrett is one of the main reasons why the Supreme Court didn't say anything about this law, which is because that she's pro-life. She's not really pro-choice, even though she is a woman who's fairly young. And I think that it comes to, like, a lot of fingers are being pointed at the Supreme Court right now because they're not taking this case. Yeah. Well, supposedly, which is understandable.
I heard that they can't necessarily.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up, is that they have. There's a process for how cases come to the Supreme Court. Like, it's very rare that, like, this eviction moratorium, for instance, people looked at that. They're like, well, why don't you just make a ruling on it like you did with the eviction moratorium? And it's like, well, the eviction moratorium ruling actually happened before they made the new rule. So when the eviction moratorium expired, it was because the Supreme Court decided this isn't constitutional. They let the case come to them. They were like, this isn't constitutional. You can't just arbitrarily create this. Congress has to make a law saying this. Yeah. It expires, and then Biden just sets another one up with the CDC like the last one. And so the Supreme Court just they didn't really make a new ruling. They just basically reminded them, like, hey, by the way, we said that you can't do this. And so they didn't. And so it's different because a new case would have to be brought to the Supreme Court about this Texas law that just passed. So it can't really, like, it could if it really wanted to, but that would go against the way that the whole process of the court operates. And it's got hundreds, if not thousands, of cases that get presented to the court, and then the court makes a joint decision on which ones they're going to take and which ones they aren't. And so it's hard to say, like, oh, we should blame, like, you blaming these people for not taking this case or looking into it when it just happened, and they also have countless other things that lots of other people find very important enough to take it all the way to the Supreme Court. And so they have to weigh all of those things in conjunction. And I think that we all,
do you think Congress is going to step in
and do what?
Make laws?
Well, they can't do anything. Like, this is now a judicial thing. Like, the Congress couldn't make a law that supersedes this law because, well, I mean, they could, but then again, it would just end up back in the Supreme Court. So that would just be a waste of Congress's time.
Yeah, but I mean, that was one of the first things I saw was Pelosi talking about how they were going to bring this up in Congress and try to, basically find a way around this stuff.
I don't know.
It's just going to prolong it because then it's just going to go. It's still going to go to the Supreme Court either way.
Yeah, I don't know how it works. I don't know if Congress can even get involved here.
Who has the ultimate power?
Right. Like, it seems like it's a judicial branch thing, but
Well, it's checks and balances. I mean, if the president and Congress, like the House and the Senate come together, they can, overturn something that the Supreme Court does. I don't know the exact parameters.
But I don't know if they can come down and overrule state.
They can, and then the state can sue the federal government, and then it would go to the Supreme Court.
So remember I was telling you the law is crafty, right? Like supposedly what I heard is that's one of the reasons that they set it up to be civil punishment, right? Like in the sense of being adjudicated in a civil court, because then that also kind of bars the federal government from being able to step in ahead of time, right? Like the federal government could have stepped and struck down the law from the start, but because the law isn't enforcing it, meaning like the
it's not a criminal law,
right? It's not a criminal law, exactly. So it's like it's a civil law, so that kind of protected them from being able to draw the attention of the federal government until it was already enacted, right? So like the federal government wasn't allowed to step in any way until it already became law, which was already like a step win for them, in getting it acted. So it was definitely crafty and
very crafty. They made bounty hunter Karens.
Yeah,
that's so crafty.
Wild.
What a crafty ass thing to do.
Like they knew that these people are standing out here with picket signs and everything anyways already. Let's just
Well, they shifted tactics. They realized that making it criminal would be a very daunting task based on everything that they've learned over the last few decades since Roe versus Wade. And so instead of that, they're looking to make, instead of criminal and personal incentives towards not getting abortions, they're creating community-based and group incentives to not get abortions.
It goes so far as I saw that actually I'll just bring up Lyft and Uber will pay drivers legal fees if they're sued under Texas abortion law.
I saw that. Yeah. Lyft came out with a very strong statement.
Yeah, they sure
That's
did.
ridiculous. These companies aren't even profitable. They don't even make profits, and they're going to be paying people's legal fees.
Well, I mean, granted,
That makes
but
no sense.
I mean, it's obviously to a we talked about private businesses are getting more involved in politics because just like politicians see it, it's a way to garner support for their
I'm not saying that
system.
I understand why they're doing it. I think it's just it's funny to me, like when you realize that a lot of these companies like Lyft and Uber don't make money. They run completely on venture capitalist money, and they make funding and stuff from firms and from wealthy billionaires and stuff like that. So the fact that they're going to take these people's investment money and then pay other people's legal fees with it is just really hilarious to me. But I get why they're doing it. It's
I don't
posturing.
I don't know anything about their earning statements, so I can't speak to it. But it's crazy.
They're like WeWork, just not as expansive. Like WeWork really jumped the gun and then collapsed.
Interesting. I didn't know that happened either. So
do you think it's just another case of corporate posturing, or do you think they really?
No, I think they care.
Yeah,
I think they care.
I think
they really care. I mean, I think it's also posturing, or
Well, I mean, driving someone to an abortion clinic in this new Texas law is aiding and abetting in that abortion,
right? And
so
you can be sued, so
everybody
affects them.
and the person who sues you and wins gets 10 grand. So there's
like you said,
incentive
this isn't just like Walmart coming out and speaking on, like it involves them, and it can directly affect them. So I see why they would make a statement, but I think that all those other things are incentive as well. Because it's not like somebody's actually sued Lyft yet or anything. Like it's not like we have a court case where a Lyft driver is being sued. They just came out proactively and were like, so that leads me to think that they wanted to make a stand or a statement about it. Because, I mean, there's a lot of this. I even saw a headline that said, like, certain states were going to restrict travel to these certain states and, like, restrict trade from Texas and stuff. So a lot of people have been trying to figure out ways to apply their own social pressure on Texas and being like, look, we do not fuck with this, So, but to catch everybody up and the viewers, if you haven't seen this, what happened was Lyft came out, like you said, under the law, anybody who's involved in what they deem an illegal pregnancy, illegal abortion can be sued. So it's like, if you drive somebody to a clinic, if you pay for somebody to get the abortion, if you're involved in any way, then you are liable as well. And so that left a lot of Lyft and Uber drivers in a precarious situation because they could essentially get sued if they were to drop somebody off at an abortion, like if they were to take a woman to go get an abortion. But Lyft in their official statement brings up a really good point. It's like this: drivers are not responsible for monitoring where their riders go or why. Imagine being a driver and not knowing if you're breaking the law by giving someone a ride. Like, I wish, you know what I mean? Like, let me sit and step up in a Lyft and they'd be like, well, where are you going today?
To the address I put in.
Yeah, I'm going where I'm going. Like, what the fuck has I got to do with any of you? It's in the, like you said, it's in the GPS. Just take me there, you know? Yeah. I couldn't imagine being like, I'm going to the clinic. And they're like, oh, well, for what? Personal fucking business. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what am I saying? Like, what are you supposed to
I don't understand how you would enforce this either. Like, how would you know if the person that was dropped off, like, say you're an Uber driver and you drop someone off at a Planned Parenthood clinic. How can you then, like, how could somebody know that the person that you dropped off then got an abortion?
Yeah.
Like, what? Like, are they privy to those records? Like, do you?
And so then that's what they're saying is then you would likely just discriminate against anybody going to a Planned Parent. Like, you would look up the address.
Addresses not allowed, and you would just have a list of them. Like, I'm sorry, I can't take you that address.
You would be just canceling.
I could drop you off 5 blocks away.
Yeah, people would just
walk.
Your Lyft driver shows up and they're like, I see you're going to a therapist.
Yeah.
I don't like crazy people.
Well, and think about it this. Like, imagine if instead of it was an abortion, but like, let's just say we've had this happen multiple times when we used to live in LA. And like, people that we worked with would have an Uber go pick up a bag from somebody else. You left something at somebody's house or at the studio or whatever. Hey, I need that bag. Put it in the Uber. I'm going to have the Uber drop it off to me here. Mm-hmm. And so the Uber they don't know what they're doing. They're just picking up a bag, just like you would if there was a person, like if it was on somebody's back, you wouldn't know. And so, like, let's just say that bag has 25 kilos of cocaine in it, and you drop it off to the drug deal, and they did their wire transfer electronically or whatever. And now you're aiding and abetting you're drug smuggling, even though you don't know it.
This is the opening scene of our movie.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah. It's great.
You know? And so, like, when you think about it like that, you're like, oh, well, yeah. How would the Uber driver know what, you can't open this person's bag, right. Or, what.
Or are you supposed to?
You look really pregnant back there. You going to be...
And how deep does this go? Because, like, if you just suspect that woman's getting an abortion, could you, as the person suing them, like, subpoena their medical records from the Planned Pregnancy?
Exactly. Like, how would you prove that they're getting an abortion at all? Like, how do you know they're not just getting an ultrasound?
Well, and then that's what sucks is then really the proof of burden and all that stuff falls in court. Like you said, now it's not really about you you could just say, hey, I seen them getting a Lyft, and they told me they were going to get an abortion.
And that's the thing.
Then everybody else has got to figure out whether or not she was actually getting an abortion.
You make the suit, you file the lawsuit, and then it comes to discovery, and then in discovery, you would have to present all of that information. Mm-hmm. And so, like, that's kind of where it gets into this weird, murky area where it's like, well, now you just have people, like, we already have an extremely litigious society, and people are quick to sue somebody over really anything. And so now that you're just giving them even more reasons to sue people and better incentives, and it's just, I fucking hate it.
It's meant to scare women from ever getting an abortion. The tactic is
it's like going straight Leninism. Like, everybody's watching you.
Yeah.
Don't fuck up out here because we got our spies out there and they're looking at you. Your kids are looking at you.
Exactly. That was my comment about this originally. Is like, this is very North Korea of Texas.
Yeah.
Like, everybody's saying Sharia law, Taliban. It feels a lot more like the kind of North Korean, like, you make sure you know everything your neighbor's doing. Yeah. And if you suspect them doing anything wrong, you better tell Papa John.
You're at fault now.
Yeah,
too,
or we're going to take you. Exactly. Because, like, what if you know that, ladies? Now we're going to sue you,
and
too.
you didn't say something or something. You know what I mean? Like, what
and now you're aiding and abetting.
Snitches get riches. That's what it all boils down to.
It's really wild. And like I said, again, crafty. That's going to be my word today. Because it doesn't make abortions illegal. It doesn't make them illegal, which you could not do. Like you said, if you were trying to make abortions illegal, then, they'd slap you in the face with that Roe v. Wade faster and make your head spin. But still, you can get an abortion. But I heard that statistically speaking, 67%, I want to say, like, limits 67% of would-be, like, people who would be getting an abortion or needed one, are now ineligible under the law. So,
and that doesn't even take into account, like I said, the fear. The fear factor. Like, how many people are unsure and are now scared and won't do it?
Dude, you don't even know you're pregnant at 6 weeks.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know a single woman. I mean, when we found out that Jessica was pregnant, I mean, she had to have been maybe a little over, like 6, maybe 8, like barely.
Yeah.
Like, you might barely have just found out that you're pregnant and then to have to, like,
Now you got to make a decision if you're
rush
going to get an
to
abortion
make
in 3
this-
days.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? That's insane.
You know what's
to
so
me.
interesting too is that I heard a lot. Like in doing some of my research, you find out that the way that they, for medical records, the way that they mark the date that you become pregnant is the day of your last period, because there's no way to tell when exactly you got conceived or the baby was conceived from your last period to your missed period. There's no way to tell. So they just ask you, when was your last period? And then you say it was such and such date. Okay, well that's when you got pregnant for medical reasonings.
Right.
So if that's the case, then anybody could come. It's not like they're going to know when your period was. So you could just come in and say, oh, my period was 4 weeks ago. Now you're within the 6-week timeline. You get your abortion.
Yeah.
They're going to carbon date that baby and find out that
They'd be like, this baby's 8 weeks old, you stupid bitch.
Yo, seriously.
They're going to carbon date.
But back to the morality of it, I get what they're trying to do, and I see why there's so much dissent. Is dissent the right word?
pushback.
Yeah, like why we can't figure this out, like why we don't get along or have a common, like, this makes the most sense, because it's so gray. Like we said, when does the life actually start? Like, is this something that, but so for me, I'm like, I'm not really pro abortion, right? So it's like, in a sense, like I understand its necessities in our society, and I'm not like mad at it, but I've met plenty of women who've been involved in that situation, and it takes a heavy toll, like it takes a heavy toll. And so it's like,
it's not an easy thing to do.
It's not an easy thing to do. And it's not easy to raise a child either by any means,
or give birth.
But it's the same, like where we were just kind of talking about a situation where I was in, where I don't even really take the act of sex very lightly because of all these ramifications, and I understand why you would not want to make abortion a willy-nilly thing, right? Like that you can just do it, because then it does kind of breed an idea where, now, granted, it's unfair that I don't have to, I can have sex with as many people as I want to, and I don't ever have to worry about getting pregnant. So I get that is an undue stress on the other sex, that we don't have that happen to us. But at the same time, like understanding like that being a ramification of having sex, or that's a possibility, it should encourage you to take precautions and steps before it ever becomes an issue or it becomes a thing. But then when it does, the idea that's just a solution, it's like, well, I got A, B, and C, and I'm just going to pick one. Like, that C option comes with a lot of psychological ramifications and just trauma. There's a lot of trauma associated with that process. And so it's like, for me, that said the same thing. Like, there's individual ways that I approach this situation. Like, I'm not the type, like, I'm not going to go and tell you what you can or can't do. That's just not me. Like, I think that's weird. I don't like when humans do it to me. I wouldn't, but I would also encourage people to really think heavily on it, like I said, I know if you're in a very sticky situation, but sometimes it's like, but I really wanted to be a lawyer, and because of my personal desires, not necessarily like incapabilities or anything, but just, I just didn't really want to do it, and then they run out and they have an abortion. I'm like, like, I wouldn't judge you or tell you wrong or anything, but like I said, if you came to me for advice and you're like, what should I do? My advice to you would be like, think really long and understand that, yes, that's going to solve one problem for you, but it does open you up to a levy of other problems.
That sounds exactly like what I would tell someone if they came to me and said they're getting a full face tattoo.
Exact.
I would be like, it's your personal choice.
Yeah, pop
it's your
off,
health, but think about, what
really
the
what
long
that means,
run and what it really,
Yeah,
like really look within yourself and
Yeah.
decide, it's because it is a personal choice. And like, I would never stop you from getting a face tattoo.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't.
I would support you.
I wouldn't create a law that says you can't or anything because I don't like them or anything like that. But that's why we often land on the idea of education. Like, I would just, understanding what it entails and what the ramifications are. Talking to other women that have been into these situations. Again, nothing that I would legally force, but that I wish that we would take more to programs and ideas rather than just what's going to happen because I said so.
I love that you brought this up. In that vein of education, as I tend to do, I've come with some interesting statistics about abortion and the demographics of people who get abortions. And so just off the bat here at the top, in the United States, just under 1 million abortions take place every year, which is about 1 in 5 pregnancies in our nation. So,
which I did not think it would be that high.
Oh yeah, it's a lot. 1 in 5 pregnancies are aborted in America. 65% of these abortions are occurring within the woman when the woman is 7 weeks pregnant or more.
Right.
So that's what you were talking about earlier about how this 6-week cutoff really precludes the overwhelming majority of abortions. Now, these are all going to be based on categories, and I thought that this website was really interesting. They have some statistics, and then they give a little action that they are prescribing to combat that statistic. But some of the actions are really interesting. I don't agree with all of them, but I do agree with some of them, and I thought it'd be interesting to go through them with you guys and get your takes on them. So first off, in race. Not every state reports the race of the people that get abortions, but the ones that do account for about 405,000 abortions per year, and Black and Hispanic women account for 55.4% of those reported. So it's hard to say what that means in the context of the rest of them, because that's only half of the amount of abortions that people get every year. But I mean, of the ones that are reported with their race, that's a huge majority, 55%.
Also, the end of that too, which is disproportionate considering the fact that Black and Hispanic women only comprise roughly 30% of the population.
Exactly.
So, but is this not the same statistics that we see in jailing and poverty and all that stuff? I would say all those things correlate.
They all
very
correlate.
strongly. They correlate
economic wealth
extremely
held
strongly
by Black and Hispanic women. Think about the economic wealth held by Black and Hispanic women. If you average it out in America to what does the average white woman in their 20s make, and what does the average Black or Hispanic woman in their 20s make? There's a lot that goes into this other than just Black and Hispanics account for 55% of abortions, but they're only 30% of the population. They're also the poorest, the least accessible to healthcare. It goes on and on, on and on. Yeah.
And there's so many different facets to this. The action that they give for this one is kind of interesting. They talk about how, given the number of minority babies aborted, we need to expose abortion as a form of racism that may be targeting minority women for profit. This also creates a demographic disaster for minority populations. So if you consider, there's this whole idea of the white genocide or whatever, the removing of the white race. This is something that very radical white nationalists talk about, the mixing of our races and all that stuff. They feel like they're going away. Whereas it seems like it might be a wash as far as the mixing of races, because considering the fact that most of the abortions are happening to Black and Hispanic women, as far as the ones that are reported, it seems like you guys are having a leg up in the sense that now white babies are proliferated more than Hispanic and Black babies. And so I thought that was an interesting perspective that they took about it, that abortion clinics are targeting lower economic and minority people in an effort to be racist.
To make money or to kill off more minorities. Yeah, that seems...
I thought that was interesting. Yeah, I was like, that's a kind of a strange statement.
You read it out loud. I was
yeah,
I would love to talk about this. So what I see with that action that they're giving here, they're
it's not really even an action.
Well, exactly. It's not really an action. What they're saying is hey, do you see these statistics? Do they make you feel a certain way?
Yeah.
Racism.
Racism.
That's what it is. They're targeting you for profit and because racism.
Yeah.
It's it just so happens that 55% of the people getting abortions are Black and Hispanic due to a myriad of factors throughout all of our culture, including where they live, how much money they make, whether or not their partner's jailed.
If you want to
think about that shit too. I mean, how many?
Like we said, that they may be single, or like you said, that their partners are incarcerated. Seeing as how those populations are heavily more incarcerated than any other population, but. Yeah,
it's a strange statement.
If you want to say maybe it's racism because a lot of people point to the fact that Blacks and Hispanics are in those economic situations because of slavery and things like that, and so if you want to kick it all the way back to slavery, which tends to be what that argument does, sure, but That's just weird to me.
I
I don't
Yeah, that-
see
all
like,
of that.
I don't see, but I wouldn't be surprised if I were to go out and do the geographical data of like where all the Planned Parenthoods are and all those stuff. I'd probably bet my money on the fact that most of those establishments are in Black and Hispanic communities,
Of
like
course.
disproportionately
Of course.
to like you go to white suburbia America, you're not going to see like abortion clinics.
A bunch of
It's,
abortion
like, on
clinics all
on
over the
corner.
place.
I also think it's interesting that I can't know this for sure, but my gut instinct tells me that the Concerned Women for America Legislative Action
Yep.
Committee is probably a board of old white women
Yep.
and
Of
old
course.
white men.
Yeah.
So it's really
Yep.
hard for me to like read that sentence and be like, they're really just trying to help minorities.
Yeah.
No, I
Like-
thought that too. As soon as I started Concerned Women of Friend, I was like, oh no, this is
Karens for
Karens for America.
like less abortion. They wrote the law. Like these motherfuckers put the law
you need
through.
to Photoshop
Oh
the
my
Karen
God.
haircut lady right there. Bang. There she is.
100%. Yep.
So
Let's keep
moving on
roasting
to
this.
yeah, dude. Some of these are.
Yeah, they look like quality.
So let's move on to age. 60% of women getting abortions are in their 20s. That breaks down to about 33% of all abortions to women who are just 20 to 24, and another 25 of abortions to women who are 25 to 29. So the largest proportion of abortions going to any age group is going to people who are 20 to 24. That's not really surprising. I don't think anybody would be surprised by that statistic. The action that they present is women who obtain abortions are mostly young women in their 20s trying to forge their way through the responsibilities of adult life. They may be putting off childbearing until they feel more stable, like you gave in the example of being a lawyer. That really throws a monkey wrench in your being a lawyer plan. It's important to support women who are young and pregnant so they don't look to abortion as their only option.
Yeah, this website's obviously tilted against abortion. So
Yeah, no,
we're
they
just
don't
putting
want
that-
abortions.
Yeah, we're
Here's
just
my
putting
favorite
it
part.
out.
There's no mention there of any type of contraceptive, birth control, anything like that. Like,
Well, they don't like any of that.
that's what I'm saying. like their action, instead of being like a lot of young women in their 20s are having abortions, instead of saying like, let's get them
Condoms
and birth
sponges
control
and stuff. Yeah,
information about
Instead, they're
safe
like,
sex.
when they get pregnant, just help them out a little bit.
Get my hand.
Let them get pregnant, though. Definitely let them get pregnant, but then help them.
But again, these are the same people that when we try and pass a law that supports them, they're gonna be like, "Nah, I don't want to pay for that."
Yeah,
And
of
it's
course
like,
not.
Yeah.
well, what the fuck are you talking about, bitch? You just said that we should.
Well, yeah, because like I said, like if it's about giving them, health care, that's not what this is about. They don't want to give them health care.
No. Marital status. Unmarried women account for about 85% of all abortions. Again, not that surprising. The action. Yeah. The action. Improving marriage rates will lower abortion rates. Few draw the clear direct connection between the collapse of the institution of marriage and the family and abortion. Churches and policies that support and encourage marriage as parenting will treat the underlying disease, not just abortion, the symptom of a larger problem. Sadly, women without supportive partners often feel they are left with no choice but to abort the child.
This is like those pamphlets you get in the grocery store parking lot.
This shit wild.
It's wild.
bro. Like if this is the other side of the argument, I'm
Oh, it is.
definitely gonna say other side because I'm against everything that these motherfuckers.
Who
are
do you
talking
think
about.
was
Like,
paying to get those bills written and passed in Texas?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
the lobbyists and the people behind that,
Yeah.
all the money behind that.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously this is a very biased website.
And well, yeah, no, I'm just saying, but like, I'm on the other side. I'm
Yeah,
on
no,
the
it's
other
good
side.
though.
Well,
Because
I think
like reading this.
improving marriage rates, like this is like they just sound so old school. Well, you just better marry that girl. You
They're
better-
Quakers.
you better-
Like they're
yeah,
just
you-
Quakers and Puritans.
Oh, you
Like,
got her pregnant. God damn it, Johnny.
This
Now
is
you
the-
gotta get married.
This is
What do
the-
they call those marriages?
That'll
Shotgun.
Shotgun weddings. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'll solve everything.
You just get married.
My papa said if you don't marry me, he's gonna come shoot
Yeah.
you down.
10 years later, he's an alcoholic,
Wow.
beating the shit out of her and everything, and we're like, oh, this is better. You
Once
know?
again, we have settled into the opening scene of Idiocracy. How many
Yeah.
times are we gonna get there in this podcast?
100%.
Jesus, man.
3 averagely intelligent dudes watch Idiocracy.
Yeah, that's
Dude, we should
essentially
do
what-
that.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
I
Hey,
just-
watch alongs.
And the fact that they called it a disease too is just like
Yeah,
what?
that's
Yeah, it's weird.
Um,
Well, they didn't call abortion a disease. They called what I understand them to be talking about as the culture of minority and lower income people as being the disease. And this is something that Thomas Sowell talks a lot about, not in that context, like as in calling it a disease, but he basically just says that there are effects that your personal culture will have on your outcomes in life, which is why, Japanese Americans do the best financially out of any other demographic in America. It's not surprising considering how hardworking those people are. Like, those things correlate. It's hard to say if it's causation, but that's kind of what they're talking about here, is what I understand, is like they're like, the culture that promotes or does not look down upon frivolous sex between partners at very young ages, not going to higher education so that you can have an opportunity to come out of the poverty line and stuff like that. They look at that as being the underlying cause of all of these symptoms, being higher abortion rates, higher births out of wedlock, single mothers and stuff like that. A lot of people on the right look at the underlying cultural influence of these lower economic societies as being the reason why a lot of their problems
that is
happen.
Causing abortion.
These symptoms,
Which I agree, but then it just always it creates that idea that abortions are like something that need to be limited. You know what I'm saying? Like it starts by saying like that, like this is a bad problem.
It's a disease. Yeah,
you
it's
know
not
what I mean?
just
Like,
our culture.
right.
It's a diseased culture.
You know, like I agree in a lot of senses, like, the dissolving of the nuclear family and a lack of moral code, does breed a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't say having more abortions is necessarily a problem. Like, I'm not saying like it's a good thing, right? You know what I mean? By any means, but I'm just saying, like, I wouldn't constitute that as a problem.
Yeah, we're not going to die out as a human race because people are having abortions.
Right. They said, what, 1 million a year?
Just under 1 million.
Like, overpopulation, a real thing. So it's like, honestly, damn, that sounds bad, but I'm just saying, like, if you don't want it, like, I don't think that it should have to come out into the world. But so I'm just like, if more people are choosing not to have a child, doesn't make it seem like a bad thing. I don't care how you're going.
I would also want them to be able to have that decision made and be able to make it in a way to where their health is safe. Because right now, think about the women who are going to get illegal abortions. Think about the rise in illegal abortions that's going to happen. The amount of, negative effects to women's health that we're going to see from just this Texas abortion bill. And if this passes in the other Republican states, because this is just the precursor, we're going to see this happen in a lot of Republican states.
Already started.
That's what the GOP is saying.
Yeah.
And I also pulled up in our Instagram chat, there's like a second paragraph in an article where it talks about how as soon as this Texas abortion ban happened, the Supreme Court 5-7 was like, we're not going to overturn this. Like they came and wrote a whole paragraph about it. So the Supreme Court 5 days ago.
There's still some more.
Well,
the most interesting fact from that thing is coming up next.
I
don't want to move off of that just yet.
We'll get into it. Go ahead.
So the
this
second
thing.
one.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So the next fact is the most mind-blowing to me as far as from this article that I read. One of the most surprising facts about abortion is that almost 60% of women obtaining an abortion have already given birth to one or more children. Only 40.3% abort their first child.
I say, duh.
Yeah, it kind of seems like it makes sense because if you had one
know
child,
what the fuck you're about to get into.
Yeah, you're like,
Well,
I can't
think
afford
about it,
all the
though.
diapers.
Fucking do that shit again.
But
like,
you're looking
crazy.
at them individually, though. Think about the idea that 60% of women that get an abortion are getting abortions for for their second, third child, not their first child. Well, if you think about that in conjunction with the fact that 60% of women that get abortions are also in their low 20s or low to mid 20s, you're talking about women that are in their 20s that already have other children and are getting abortions. And so, like, when you combine, that's what really got me. I was like, damn, I never thought, like, I had the same reaction that you guys did. Like, oh, well, duh, like, you've already got a child. You probably can't really handle more, so you get an abortion. But then I thought about it. I was like, damn, some of these women already got multiple children. They're only in their 20s. Like, I for some reason in my head, I had this idea that, like, the young mother was, like, a single child mother. But they're not. They have multiple children.
I know plenty of single moms that have 3 kids or more.
That are under 30?
Kids, yes.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
Our
for some
sister.
reason that I don't know why, but for some
She's not
reason
single.
in my brain, I was like thinking like, yeah, you would have one child when you're young, and then you realize like, oh shit, and then you start having.
Well, you
children.
also made the assumption that these would be single mothers. There's nothing here that says they don't have partners. Like every one of these women could have partners in these scenarios. So it's like you could be a young woman in your 20s, or you and your partner have already had a kid.
I guess that's true.
You're starting your life.
The
and it's
statistic
like,
they used was unmarried, so that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not in a relationship with somebody else.
Oh yeah, and definitely I'd look up that statistic, and I mean you'll see how many unmarried women are with their partners and have children with them. Like it's a huge number.
Yeah,
I mean, I definitely see what you're saying in the sense that it lends to think that a lot of these women are, I don't want to use the word promiscuous, but they're obviously not
floozies.
They're not.
Sorry, that was a joke.
Yeah. Yeah, guys, we make jokes about everything, so you just got to bear with us.
You have to bear with us. We are dangerous.
But you know, like that you know, you almost feel like, oh, you should have learned your lesson back in the contraceptive stage or some shit like that, you know? So it's like, but at the same time, like, I know for me personally, like, I was more open to the idea of having a child until I had one. And then that slammed that door shut for me. Brody, if you're watching this, I love you to death. I'm just saying, like, I wouldn't do it again. You know, like, now knowing what I know about what it takes to raise a child, I realized that I made that decision far too willy-nilly. Like, I did not really actually weigh the consequence of what that lifestyle entails.
And you didn't even have to carry the baby.
You know what I mean? So that's a whole nother steez, you know? Because that's one thing too, you know, like you said, that the health ramifications of it is huge. And the fact that ultimately once that child comes into the world, the responsibility will fall solely on you. Like, that's one thing I do believe, in the sense of, like, it is, because of the nature of it, easier for a man to walk away from a child than a mother ever could, you know, even if they're willing to. It's just not, it's just more likely, you know what I mean? Like, the guy's going to be able to dip a lot faster than a girl would be.
Yeah,
able
not
to.
every case, but, you know, in the vast majority of cases, it's a single mother, not a single father.
You know what I mean? Like, not in every case, just like with anything, but the statistics are overwhelming.
Yeah,
that it's,
the majority is single
it's going to fall on the mom's shoulder.
And that's why, and I think that's why when you see, like, custody battles, a lot of them go towards the mother, even in extenuating circumstances where it's like, well, really, you know, like, the guy's a lot better off, and such and such and such, and maybe he's got better, like, his mental faculties are a little bit more in line, but there's something that humans understand about the bond between a child and the mother. And not just humans, but mammals in general. That's, you know, that's kind of how mammals operate. Males go from one partner to another. It's human beings and a few other very rare animals are the only kind of monogamous for life mates, you know, where you have one mate and you have children with that one mate and that's it, and you don't do anything else. Normally in the animal kingdom, which we come from, the dude would have a child with this woman and that woman. You'd have a whole harem, you know, like at chimpanzees, you'd have a whole harem, and like all the other dudes wouldn't have sex with any women, and you'd have sex with all of them. And so it's like, that's kind of how it normally goes.
Yeah. And they're like, all right, cool, you got that baby? All right, I'll be over here.
I'll be over here fucking this other chick. Yeah.
That's why the Supreme Court of Chimpanzees ruled in 1975.
So I'm glad that you said that, though.
Yeah, so we can move on from this now.
Well, I wanted to bring up the point that, like you were saying, like the fact that it's because men are in the Supreme Court and all these establishments that's why this proliferates. But here we have an entire website by the Concerned Women for American Legislative
I'm
Action.
sure, I don't remember what the statistic was. I was watching a Tim Pool video, and he was talking about how the overwhelming majority of women in the United States are pro-life.
Yeah, right. Because of this statement, one would think that having other children would change a mother's heart to welcome the beauty and joy of mothering. It's like, yo, you have a very rose-colored glasses view on what, you know what I mean? Like,
well,
why would you assume
it's a lot
that
easier to be a
sees it as
mother
beauty
when
and joy?
your husband works and makes all the money, and he's got a great job, and you've got this big ass house, and you got a dog, and you live in the suburbs, and you got good schools around you, and you got lots of money.
It's
like, it makes all of those things make having a child way easier.
Yeah. And
not that it's easy, but it's easier than being poor, addicted to crack, and like not having anything, nobody to help you.
In prison.
Yeah,
or
you're
one
fucking.
or one of the 60% of Americans who works retail. So you and your partner both work retail, and
Which
you're
is,
both
like,
making fucking $10 an hour, and you're barely scraping together in an apartment, and all of a sudden she's pregnant. What makes more sense to somebody there who's in their early 20s? You know, it's up to them to decide, because as a culture,
daycare is fucking expensive.
It's incredible.
You hit
It's
on
And I'm
another
not
great
surprised.
point.
People are surprised at how expensive daycare is, and I'm like,
No, 'cause
you're
it's hard.
hiring
It's-
somebody to take care of your baby.
It's a
That's a
massive
ridiculously hard thing to do. It's like, it's already hard to do it for your own child, but now you're gonna hire some third party who doesn't have any connection to your child whatsoever. I'm not surprised at that. I'm kind of surprised at how cheap it is.
Yeah. And from a legality standpoint, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's why I am pro-choice in that sense from legality standpoint, because again, I don't want you to have the kid. If you're going to have the kid and you can't feed it, you can't take care of it, then it has to go into the system. And as if that's like a better solution. You know what I'm saying? Like as a life growing up where your parents didn't want you, or that you had to live in an institution where the government takes care of you, or I have to pay taxes to support the child. Like, how is that scenario somehow a better situation than just being like, you're not going to get this opportunity for life
Because you're murdering babies.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where and you know, with all these laws and stuff like that, that's the slider that they're playing with.
Yeah.
Is, you know, they're trying to push it as far as they can to, like, we're going to make it as hard as possible, as difficult as possible to get an abortion, because we don't want you to get it at all.
Yeah.
And legally, you gotta have some law in the books that lets you technically get one, but we're gonna fight tooth and nail against it, and make it as hard as possible.
Yeah.
Just real quick, so before we get to that Supreme Court article, since we're already on this vein, like, that's the most interesting thing about this Texas law, right? That, to me, when I looked at it, is it makes no exceptions. It only makes an exception for if you are medically in danger. So if like, you know, having the child is killing you as a person, then you can abort the child to save your own life. But rape, incest, any other exception,
Defects,
completely eliminated. Now, the defects conversation gets weird for me, because if I have a baby and it turns out to have Down syndrome, can I now kill it?
No, but they have tests for unborn babies to find out, like, if they're going to have genetic mutations or I don't know all the proper terminologies, but like something like Down syndrome or anything
autism.
Anything that could be like severely debilitating to the
child.
child.
If I think I'm having a white baby, but my white baby turns out to be black and I don't want it, can I just be like, oh, no, black baby?
No.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't like that idea of being like,
what if you tested
based
the
on
baby?
certain characteristics of the baby.
My baby's going to be really dumb.
Yeah,
So,
like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I
that's
wanted
wild.
a 6 foot tall baby.
I see what you're saying.
This baby seems like it only has the genes to get 4 foot.
I find that interesting, considering it's the exact same logic as if you are financially not capable of handling the child, because the whole reasoning behind having the abortion would be that the child is not going to have as good a life as it could if I was more in a position to take care of it. The same could be said even if you are financially stable for a child with severe Down syndrome. You could make the argument that they won't have as good of a life as someone who doesn't have Down syndrome.
But I would never make that argument. Like, why?
But the logic is exactly the same.
Why would we say, like, because you have a disability? That's been shown time and time again that you could still have an amazing life and have a disability.
You could have an amazing life and be poor too.
No, but no, you can't. If you starve to death, then you can't have an amazing life.
That's not
You know
true.
what I mean, like, that's
Monks would beg to
like,
differ. Some monks starve
I
themselves
would
to death as a form of protest, as a form of meditation. Like, because the only reason I bring this up is because it's a complete contradiction with the point that you just made.
No, I'm not. Like, I'm clarifying. Providing basic needs, right? Maslow's hierarchy of basic needs, right? Like, that's the fundamental thing that you need to be a functioning adult. You don't need to be smart. Being smart has nothing to do with living a basic life. You know, food, water, shelter, social interaction. A Down syndrome baby has the full potential to see those 4 things happen, as compared to, like, I can barely feed myself. There's no way I can afford to feed the baby. The baby, therefore, will have a dramatically less quality of life just based on human needs. You know, like I said, like, you don't have to become wealthy to have a good life. You don't have to be able to play basketball really well to, you know what I mean? Like, all these things that would just affect them on a caricature level of, like, what type of personality they're going to have, or what, you know. So that's why I say the difference, you know, being able to I'm not even saying, like, oh, well, if you can't put your baby through college, then you need to, you know, get it out. You know, it's just like, if you literally are having a problem providing for yourself, like you said, maybe you're a crackhead, you know, maybe whatever, you work retail and you're debt to the max, like, literally you're about to get evicted from your home already, you bringing a baby into the situation so all you can live on the street, well, that is a huge hindrance to the child's just basic needs. And that's what I'm saying. So, like, to me, I don't see how having a mental disability, if maybe you can make that argument, well, I could take care of a healthy baby, but I can't afford to take care of a handicapped baby, then okay, all right, maybe. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's hard enough to get daycare as it is.
Right.
Yeah, getting daycare for a mentally
care,
or physically disabled child is.
But just because it's like, you know what I mean? Like I said, okay, personal example, the one I always love to bring up. I didn't think my kid was gonna be transgender. You know what I mean? Like, and then, so if I could have known that ahead of time and then would just like abort my kid because I was like, oh, I don't want no fucking transgender child. You know, that's weird to me. But again, I would never tell anybody what to do. So it's like, you know, by all means, if you don't feel like you're capable or don't want to or whatever, you know, do you. But if you were asking me and like, do I think that that's cool or not? I'd be like, it's not that cool. You know?
Do I think
Yeah, it's just one of the.
It's selfish.
It's one of the common like laws that they're like, you know, like being able to get an abortion because your baby has a high percentage chance of being born with Down syndrome is just like, that's one of the things that's kind of on the books already. It's one of the, when you mention how this had no exceptions, that's one of the exceptions that jumped into my mind too. Is just like, you know, if you're gonna give birth to a baby and you know ahead of time the physical and mental struggles it's going to have, it's not going to have the quality of life where it's even going to know its real consciousness.
Yeah, if you're going to birth a vegetable or something.
Exactly,
yeah,
something like that, or a baby that's got a genetic heart mutation that it's just going to die anyway.
Or has like a 2-week chance of living.
There's so many different
I get that.
ways of looking at that. That's not just like, you know, Down syndrome or not.
Well, this is just the whole abortion topic, and really most legal issues come to a argument about where we're going to draw an arbitrary line.
Right.
And so that's what everybody's, I mean, you're drawing an arbitrary line at economic status rather than the physical and mental makeup of the child. Other people draw some people's arbitrary line is as soon as sperm meets egg, that's baby, no killing.
Yeah, because for me, that like
no plan B pill. Fuck that.
It doesn't start for me until that baby like breathes life. Like honestly, until you separate that child from the mother, then I'm like, all right, that's by definition like a freestanding individual with its own
like all of our Constitution, Bill of Rights, everything's born. Like you're born with these things.
You know what I mean? Like, but as long as that thing's tethered to you and it's really just like a sack that you're carrying around with you, I'm just like, you know,
you get to do with that sack as you please.
It's part of you. I wish somebody would come and tell me I can't cut this lymph node off my neck.
I just envision a mom with like an umbilical cord, just like, I'm not ready to cut you out yet. Just fucking whapping it like a stick and bindle, but with like a baby hanging from it.
We're definitely canceled now.
We love our tasteless jokes, don't we? My tasteless joke was like the baby's kicking too hard. It's like, I'm gonna get rid.
You fucking calm down in there. I'm gonna send the bouncer in there in a second. We're gonna fucking throw you out of this club.
Goodness.
Funny but not funny.
Funny but not funny. That's kind of the flavor that we like.
Funny but not funny.
Yeah, we like that flavor.
What's the Supreme Court thing? We got the
so this was, we were talking about the Supreme Court, and I would go down to the second paragraph because they actually gave a ruling basically saying like, we're not gonna fuck with this. The vote was 5-4 with Chief Justice John Roberts Jr. joining the court's 3 liberal members in dissent. The majority opinion was unsigned and consisted of a single long paragraph. It said the abortion providers who had challenged the law in an emergency application to the court had not made their case in the face of complex and novel procedural questions. The majority stressed that it was not ruling on the constitutionality of the Texas law and did not mean to limit procedurally proper challenges to it. So this is like basically saying like, these laws are going to keep coming up in these other states. There's going to be emergency applications to the court. They're going to have to make a decision. They can't keep kicking the can. This is kicking the can.
Well, I think that this is legal 101. If this is how you get off, is by procedures. Like if you ever wondered how somebody gets off with a crime that you know that they committed, it's through procedural stuff.
Yeah.
And so like Alan Dershowitz is a really good example. Alan Dershowitz has represented people who are known murderers, but because their rights were infringed upon in their trials, he gets the trial thrown out and the person released from prison. And he makes a very strong statement. He's like, look, I'm not condoning the fact that they're murderers, but as somebody who works in the legal, like in the field of the judicial system, and understanding that he's of the belief that justice is the process done right. And so whenever the process is not done right, even if you think that the outcome was correct, it's not justice because you fucked with the process. You tampered with evidence, or you left out something that could have been
An
favorable.
extremely flawed process to start with, but I feel him.
Yeah, I mean, and
It
so
goes back
I'm
to
not
the
saying
game
that I agree with him.
conversation.
Right. If
Yeah.
the rules fucking suck, then it doesn't make for a good game.
I'm not agreeing with him, but that's how this is how procedurals work, and that's why. And the judicial, like the Supreme Court, is all about procedures.
True.
Like that's kind of how they.
That's why I said
That's
they
how they
couldn't
work.
come
So
into this.
they were like, look, we can't in good standing make a ruling on this based on its constitutionality, because that would be preempting the fact that you didn't bring it to us in the right way.
What do y'all know about Trump appointing 3 judges to the judicial branch or to the Supreme Court that based solely on the merit that they would overturn Roe v. Wade? This is something I heard. I don't know if this is true, and I want to know if you've heard something
He
about this.
packed the courts, and part of that it makes it's if you look at the number of judges that Trump got pushed through
Just
in his
because he
term.
Like
pushed
3.
through they were all
And-
open seats.
Well,
and
no, I'm
they-
not talking about just the Supreme Court. I'm talking about judges in general, all the federal courts. He packed it. That was the whole purpose
It's not
behind.
packing if you fill an empty seat.
Well, I mean, I guess you see
That
what I'm
defeats
saying.
the
Though
purpose.
He-
You're
he-
changing the definition of that term.
Well, it takes a lot of review and stuff, and it was rushed in the sense of like we're going to get as many as possible. Like our plan.
That's not any
I don't wanna
different than
get hung up on
anybody
a straw
else.
man. Did he put pro
Yes.
life judges in
Of
there?
course he did.
Yeah.
Because just like every other president, the people who are paying for him to be president gave him a list of names.
Yeah.
And they said, these are the people that we want on the Supreme Court. These are the people we want you to nominate. These are the people who are going to vote against Roe v. Wade. And it says right here, they're going to take up a separate case in its new term this fall to decide whether Roe v. Wade should be overruled. So they're going to discuss the constitutionality of abortions very soon in the fall. So, yeah, like the idea that Trump put 3
Seems like a Republican
people on the
setup.
yeah. Well, I mean,
Like
he knew
they've
what he
been
was
working
doing.
on this for a couple
that's,
years.
That's kind of the point I'm trying to say is like, regardless of whether or not he filled all these seats too fast or whatever, he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, of course.
The key strategy of the Trump administration was to get as many judges in as possible so that they could implement.
But again, that's not something new. Like Democrats do this all the time. And really the only reason that it was such a big deal this time is because Ruth Bader Ginsburg didn't resign and she died. And so instead of resigning when Obama was president, where he could have nominated somebody, she died. And then
I'm
she
not
died
trying
when
to-
Trump was the president, and so he got to put somebody in there.
I'm not trying to knock Trump or the right Republicans for doing
Well, that's
it.
what I'm saying.
I'm just talking about it in context to this abortion law that's coming.
Yes,
up.
did the
I don't
Republican
really
president
care
put
whether or
judges
not.
who are pro-life in their positions? Absolutely. Is that strange? No.
No, I mean to be pro-life, but on the merit of being pro-life. You know what I mean? And I'm trying to build a case where a conspiracy.
I think that's
I feel
that's a
like
super
The Republicans
jump.
have been at this for a minute, where they knew that they were going to
I buy
start
that.
an assault on the Roe v. Wade decision because
I buy it.
like that
Yeah.
the judge thing started happening, and then now you're seeing these crazy Texas laws come out where just right in lockstep the Supreme Court's like, well, I don't want nothing to do with it, and it's like. It just all seems like damn, right? And then like you said, then immediately other Republican states are already like, yeah, we're about to get something like this popping too. It just seems like a coordinated attack, you know.
Well,
the Republicans all across the nation coordinated to get an issue leaned in the side that they want.
Yeah.
Like that's what I think is so strange, that the way that you guys are wording it. Like it's not any different than anybody else would do. Like, yes, they coordinated over a course of many years to change the reality in our country.
I think you're contributing maliciousness to my statements, like that I care or something, or I think that was a bad thing or anything. I'm just saying, did this or did this not happen?
Yeah,
Which
and it
did
looks
happen,
like
right?
it did. It looks like they definitely knew from basically Trump's win, probably further back than that, because I mean you got to look at the people supporting Donald Trump and how the Republicans who instead of running against him conceded and put their backers behind him. So I mean it makes sense that at least 5 years they've been really
Right.
And I mean honestly, if we did the research, it probably goes back even further, but we can look just with our averagely intelligent brains and say in the last 5 years has the Republican Party been pushing hard knowing that
this,
they were going to in a coordinated way overturn
pressure
Roe
on
v.
it,
Wade.
right.
Looks like it.
Yeah,
Definitely.
looks like they've been setting up for it. So it's gonna get tricky, but I mean, overall, I'm with it. I'm with the women here. You know what I'm saying? I think that this shit is whack. It's just super whack. Really, I get hung up on 2 points. All points, really, honestly, all points. If you look at all of them, using civil lawsuits and not only just saying like you can bring a lawsuit, but saying, oh, you could also get 10K. 10K is a lot of fucking money, dude. It almost, you know what I mean? Like if I had less morals, I'd be out here hunting fucking women.
I'd be getting women pregnant to then
and then tell them to go on to the court. No, dude, I saw a meme that was like that. It
Again,
was like,
another joke.
Yo, it was like a meme that was like,
wild.
if in Texas, if a father rapes his
I saw
daughter,
this meme.
yeah, and then forces her to get an abortion, he can collect $10,000 off of it too. And I'm like, damn, like that's wild to me. Like that's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy when you think about it like that.
You know what I mean? That's crazy. But that the fact that there's no allowances for rape, like we kind of glossed over this, but I feel like that in all circumstances is a completely valid reason to get an abortion. Like I don't think you should have to have the baby of somebody who raped you.
That's
Well,
like,
they're not saying that you can't have that you have to have the rape baby. They're just saying that you got to make sure that you get that shit cut out
before 6 weeks.
Before 6 weeks is done.
Yeah,
and it's
but
like,
then
bitch,
how
I'm
do
still
you even know?
traumatized
You know
by
what
being
I'm
raped.
saying?
I don't
And then
know.
I gotta turn around and have the trauma of getting the thing and immediately make that decision. Like it's just like
It's like you wake up the next morning in the hospital from being raped, and you're like, you guys got to go in and get this fucking baby out of
like,
me.
Yeah, I gotta
in
get the
case I'm
paperwork real
pregnant,
quick.
Like
Yeah.
just abort. You know,
It's ridiculous.
And that's just that. So those two things, you know, is crazy to me. And then the fact that 6 weeks. 6 weeks.
It's just not enough time.
It's a gray area. Like you said, I don't know if we make it 9 months or we make it one, but 6 weeks is just so far up against this backing. Like, you know, you could still extend it a little ways to give them if you were trying to be helpful, which they're obviously not, you know, you could still restrict. Cause I know that a lot of people have a lot of problems with like third term abortions and stuff where like
Third trimester,
you know what I mean? Like where this baby could be born. It could live a life, but then you're gonna end it. Like I get that, but there's still so much room in between that happening.
6 weeks
to,
and,
like,
and 9 months.
Yeah, it's like they pushed it as far up against that barrier.
It's
as
basically
they
a
could.
window of 2 weeks. Because
Essentially.
the 4 weeks is the span of between your periods.
Yes.
So you basically have 2 weeks to find out that you're pregnant and then get the abortion.
Yes, and that's
just not enough time.
That's just insane.
That's just
and
not
that's
enough
just
time.
our basic understanding of women's health. I'm sure with some women it's
I almost
more
feel
or
like
less or
Well, yeah, because personally, you know, your period could be. There's women who don't have regular periods, so they fluctuate. So it could go all the way up for an extra week before you have it, and so it's all of that being accounted for. 6 weeks ain't enough fucking time.
Yeah.
I almost feel like you encourage more abortions too. Like, you know how many women have thought they were going to get an abortion, but then they never really like make it to the clinic because, it's not like, you got time. And then
It's a huge
eventually
decision.
You
you're
put
like,
it off, and then eventually you have this baby, and you become attached.
You start thinking about it and you're like, you know what? Maybe I don't want to do this.
Yep.
But now it's like,
It's
you
a
need
mad rush.
snapshot judgment right now for
Hurry
the
up.
rest of your life. Do you want to do it or not? And you're like, yeah. I'm just going to do it. Fuck
Hey,
it,
bus
'cause,
is
like,
pulling
you know
up,
what I'm
on or
saying?
off.
Like, get on this bus or it's gone forever. I think it just encourages you to go get it as fast as possible and then not
I agree.
have to run the risk.
I agree with all your points there, and I would like to specifically point again to the Supreme Court and say, like, shame on you for not stepping in on this Texas law. I mean, I guess procedural or whatever. You don't need to rule on the constitutionality of abortions. What you need to say is, this is too restrictive. There needs to be something done about the restrictive nature of this. Because if the Supreme Court in a ruling 7-5 is like, no, we're not going to fuck with this Texas law. And the Texas law says if you get raped, you got to keep the baby if you don't get figured out after 6 weeks. That seems like infringing on women's rights.
Yeah.
That seems very restrictive on a woman's
But they're
right.
not allowed to know if it infringes on people's rights unless you go by procedure.
Yeah, that's... And
But
that's
And now, okay, I'm making light of it, but I think that it's very important. Like, I don't want to make light of that because of this particular issue, we're saying you should be able to go in and make a decision about this. But then that would just undermine the whole idea of procedure, and then they could just be making decisions about whatever willy-nilly. And so, like, that's kind of the whole idea of the judicial system, is that it's by procedure, which is why it's supposed to be the one that checks the executive orders from the president and the Congress stuff. So, although, yes, I agree with you that it seems ridiculous that they wouldn't say anything about it, I understand why they didn't, just based on the tenuous grasp of how the legal system works. Because if you start undermining procedure for this issue, then why can't you do it for other issues? Why can't you do
then
it
we
for
end up
everything?
with executive order law, which
Exactly.
is what we live in now, which
Yeah.
is like, I'm just going to subterfuge, you know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
because
and
then you have,
subterfuge.
Governor Abbott and the Texas legislature makes this law, and then he gets voted out and somebody else comes in and then they change it. And I had the same question with student debt, because a lot of people want Biden to use a provision from the original. I can't remember if it's Eisenhower. I don't think it was Eisenhower, Roosevelt. But basically, when they started doing federal loans for school, there's a provision in there where the president could forgive that debt. And so they're like, Biden, why don't you forget the student loan debt? And I was like, well, if he does that by executive order and then Trump gets reelected in 2024, could he just reinstate all that debt with an executive order? Because it's like interesting how that works. And so you don't want that back and forth going on completely. And that's why the judicial system has to come in and be like, look, this is now set in stone.
Yeah, checks.
There's no more changing this. It is what it is.
It will be approached, though. I mean, like you said, in the next year, there's no way that the federal.
Well, I mean, just look at it, for instance. In 1973, the Supreme Court decided,
well, then
it's legal. You can have an abortion.
Yeah. There was actually another case, I think they said in 1992.
There's been plenty of cases along the years
that came into it. But yeah.
But this is the one.
I've also wanted to get into Roe v. Wade and figure out exactly what. Does it just say that it's legal to have one, or does it lay out its own parameters of when? And I would assume, obviously, it doesn't, seeing as how Texas was allowed to move it up and
the
down and wherever they want
no,
to.
It's and that's kind of, the Supreme Court can't do those kinds of things. Like, okay, you can have an abortion, but it has to be this. Like, it only decides whether something's a constitutionally viable or not. So, like, if you make a law that says that it's 6 weeks, then they can say whether or not that's too restricting. But they can't say, if you just make it illegal to have abortions, they can't come in and be like, no, you can make it legal, but only up to 6 weeks.
It's probably some
like they don't make the rules. They just say whether the rules are good or not.
They'll put language in, like, like a unnecessary, like a
when they write their opinions, they'll put things that would be interpreted as guidelines for how you would make this law better.
Yeah, like undue parameters or
exactly.
Yeah.
But they don't actually come in and change the law themselves and be like, this is what we think the law should be.
Well, I mean, with this whole conversation, I do want to not apologize, but just offer the recognition to any of our female viewers that I understand that I have a very limited perspective on this, but it's my only perspective. So I can't see this situation as a woman, like that idea. And as the woman population, I would encourage you guys to not count out all men and their involvement in this situation. Like, I get it that it sucks that you would feel like men are making these decisions for women, because
for a long time they did.
It just seemed a long time they did. And statistically speaking, or just numerically speaking, they are now, but I think limiting our discourse in this and saying, well, you're not involved type shit is also not necessarily fair.
It just sets up a pendulum system, because then you shut out men for 30 years and then the right circumstances come about where there's enough judges who think certain way, and then men swing the pendulum back. But instead of going back to, we're going to think about it together, it goes to, we're going to tell you what the fuck to do with your baby.
Right. And I definitely think, like you said, that we have to, with everything, with anything, as far as humanity is concerned, women and men are involved. And so we got to all come to a decision together.
We're all human beings.
You know what I mean? And I, like I said, I definitely understand the criticism. Same as like any other race that's not a white male. They're going to say, well, we feel misrepresented or underrepresented. And I get that. That's a conversation for another day. But I just want to say that from my own personal opinion.
And I also want to
add
add
that these are my guy opinions.
Yeah, and I want to add to that and say that, like, we have to talk about everything. Like, that to me is like an important part about society, is discussing everything.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not discussing abortion as if I have the lived experience of someone who's dealt personally with it. Right. I'm only speaking from my point of view, and I'm not trying to represent anybody else's opinion. Right. But I also am not a woman, and you have to, certain things come with certain realizations. Like, if you're going to talk about the military and talk about the army and talk about, like, we should go to war here or go to war there, and you've never served, then it's like, well, you lose.
We appreciate your ideas, but there's some context that you're missing.
You're missing some amount of the context, which we are obviously missing the context of having women's biology.
Yeah, right. Like, I've never carried a birth a woman.
And we are just acknowledging that and saying, like, yes, we are not women, but we have opinions on things.
Like, thank God I'm not a lawmaker so that I can have my opinion. Like, it's just out here for the ocean. Yeah. Do it as you will. But I'm just a guy on a podcast saying his own opinion. Don't come at me and be like.
And for me personally, like, I am pro. So I'm not I wanted to make this distinction earlier, but I just didn't because I wanted to interrupt you. But I'm not pro-abortion, and I think that it's important to call it pro-abortion rather than pro-choice, and that's just me being a nitpicky language person. But like if you're pro-choice, then it's kind of surprising that the pro-choice people are also against choice when it comes to like vaccines or other things like that. But as far as abortion goes, like I would hope that I never have to be in the position where I might have to consider having an abortion. And if it were solely up to me, I would never have an abortion. The woman that I impregnate, we would have the child and maybe put it up for adoption if we really can't take care of it. But my input would be 100% no, don't abort the child. We don't have to, like I said, we can put it up for adoption. We can do all kinds of the other things. But I would be very, very upset if the woman I impregnated got an abortion. That being said, I don't really care if women get abortions. That don't involve me. Like, do whatever. Like I'm kind of where you are. Is like third trimester shit. Like I'm like, look, shit comes up, whatever. It's kind of cold-hearted, but at the same time, like I can't be worried about every child, every unborn baby on the face of this earth. Like I got lots of shit to deal with. So it's like, hey, look, if you people over there, you want to have an abortion, that's fine. Yeah, I'm not gonna tell you what to do with your body or your baby, but that's where I stand on it. I wouldn't want to get one, but it is what it is.
Question. Why are you more open to the choice of adoption than you are abortion?
It stems from the same reason why if I was going to carry a firearm with me, I would have non-lethal rounds, because I understand that it's really good for protection. And when you're faced with somebody with a gun, really the only thing that can help you is a gun. But I don't really have any desire to kill anybody, and that's regardless of age.
Okay. That's cool. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I mean,
I would say just to kind of speak on, you made a very, a stance about your personal thing there. Mm-hmm. And it made me think, and I would have a conversation with my partner, but ultimately I would let the woman decide. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just...
I mean, I wouldn't force... Like, that's the same thing for me. I wouldn't force her to not get one, but I would have a very strong conversation with her and say, look, if you want my opinion, I would say don't do it.
That's the way it sounds.
Strong conversation.
A real strong conversation with her.
It was just a funny, like, I imagined you...
rhetorically strong.
I imagined you in the, no, you're not going to, no.
No, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not going to tell her what to do, but I definitely wouldn't continue. I find it...
not fucking no abortion, bitch.
This is my opinion. I can say that I would find it... I don't know, because I'm not in this relationship yet, but if I was in a relationship with a woman and she got pregnant and she decided against my will to have an abortion, I would think that it'd be very difficult for me to continue having a relationship with this woman.
I feel you on that one.
Like, hey, look, like you said, if you're going to have the abortion, me and you are done.
Yeah. I got to feel you on that one. Because like you said, not based on the abortion, but just based on the fact that
you're just going to not, you don't give a shit about what I have to say. Like, why would I, what, I'm going to get married to you? What if we get pregnant again? What if I find out you never wanted to have kids and you just never told me?
Yeah, no shit.
Nah, I'm cool.
I would be down on that too, so whatever.
That'd be the same thing if she went out and like bought a house without if we were thinking about buying a house,
what
and
about
she's like, I like this house and not this house, and it's like, well, I don't really give a shit what you think. I'm gonna buy this house. It's like, okay, well, you can live in it by yourself.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. Cool. Let's talk about the old Biden, because I already got heard a lot of people talking about he came out with some statements on this stuff, and then everybody, the right-wing people obviously were like, Afghanistan, don't you fucking dare try and change the topic.
On top of that, they pointed to his past stances on abortion. I mean, he was a devout Catholic. Yeah. So a devout Catholic is against contraceptives if you're a devout Catholic.
And abortions.
And abortions, for sure.
Yeah.
And now he's basically saying, like, what they're doing in Texas is bad, and we're gonna fight for women's rights. And it's like, it seems hollow coming from a guy who's a Catholic. Mm-hmm. It just seems hollow. It's like, if your religion is like, and like maybe,
he's doing the moral legal.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's why it feels hollow, because it feels so wishy-washy. It's like, if Joe Biden was a devout Catholic and was against abortion, but allowed abortion to be the law of the land because he understood that we're a secular society, cool, I'm all for that. But, to change your stance and just kind of check the political wins, as we like to say. Like, that feels scummy on an issue that's this important to half of America.
Yeah.
You
Has
know?
he stood on a stance of pro life before, or like pro-choice or anything?
He's made statements.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was a devout Catholic.
Yeah.
It's
You know.
very rare to find a politician that will take a hard stance on this position, on abortion.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like they'll say, like you said, they'll make little statements and they'll be like, well, you know, I understand the realities of this and that. It's a very no, you know, it's, you know, you're not gonna be like, sir, do you approve of abortions? Yes, I fucking love abortions. Next question.
That's what I was gonna say. Why people don't
use
say
certain
pro-abortion, because nobody's nobody wants you to have an abortion.
No,
They
there
just
are pro-abortion
want you
people.
to be
People like, dude, I saw this TikTok of this girl. She was outside, like she was like fucking with protesters who were protesting outside of a Planned Parenthood or something like that, and she was like, abort it. She had it in selfie mode in front of these women who have like signs and stuff. She's like, abort it, abort it, abort. And I'm like,
She's pro-abortion.
yeah, there are some pro-abortion people.
The whole topic pro-abortion rather than pro-choice.
There's radicals on every side.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. There's also people that bomb Planned Parenthood places.
yeah.
So I'm not making light of anybody here.
She's out here with the selfie.
Crazy people are crazy people, regardless of their political distinctions.
But nonetheless, yeah. So it could be political. I mean, like I said, definitely, I feel like Lyft had incentives to get involved, but they also just like wanted to get some points, you know. And I feel like, as a Democrat, like, you gotta, you know what I mean? You gotta stand up and
Yeah, how you can be a pro-life Democrat?
yeah, you gotta sign
That's
up.
tough.
Yeah,
That's a tough
sell.
Like, you ain't gonna be very powerful politician.
But then also, man, like the dichotomy of being the person though. Because then you also got to go to church on Sunday. You just said all this stuff about like, yo, I'm going to fight for these rights and everything. Everybody's looking at you.
You got to go take communion on Sunday.
You ain't no real Catholic.
See, that's the beauty of being the president, is that the church comes to you. You don't go to church.
That's true. They got that special church.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. The special church.
And they don't just let anybody up in that motherfucker.
Because they got to make laws and shit in church.
Probably the most underused room in the White House, the church.
Yeah, no doubt.
Even though all of these men are supposedly extremely religious.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of, you know, what I was getting at with this Catholic and the secular aspect of it. It's like, we are not supposed to be a religiously run nation.
Right.
This Texas abortion law seemed like it was probably crafted by, you know, the fundamentalist Christian people who really wanted abortion to stop.
They tend to be the people that care.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. So now you have a president who's Catholic, who's supposed to be against abortion based on his beliefs, saying like, okay, I'm not against abortion anymore. I'm gonna help fight against this law in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Where, like I said, I think it would be a little more genuine if he just didn't take a stance on abortion and was rather just like, hey, you know, we're a secular society, you know, like I can be pro-life and also advocate for you to have your rights under the law.
Yeah, because that's 100% like how I try and do it. Like I said, I really try and separate my subjective experience versus like the objective reality.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm a very spiritual guy. I believe in like God and stuff, but I don't expect anybody else to. I don't like approach the situation in that way. So like you said, I could have a lot of respect for him if he was like, you know, like you said, separation of church and state type deal. And he was like, you know, that's my personal moral beliefs, but this is the law. But I just think this dude,
in your 70s, you're just going to suddenly be pro-choice.
just,
You know, it just seems...
he's not a good president to me.
And that's kind of where that's what our topic is kind of morphing into. 'Cause
Sleepy Joe Biden.
There's been a lot of problems with Sleepy Joe the past couple of weeks. I mean, I've seen, you know, the Afghanistan withdrawal where he comes out and he's like, great success. We got out 127,000 people. Great success.
I can't believe they kept saying that. Like, this is the biggest, most successful air evacuation ever done in the history of the world.
It sounded like the mission accomplished statement that George Bush gave us.
Yeah, and it's like, well...
Like, Trump was a lot better at
Yes.
blowing smoke up our ass. At least. You
Yeah,
know,
he
like,
could word it in a
come
way.
out
Like,
and he'd be like, this is perfect. It's exactly what we wanted. And it made you, like, question yourself. You're like,
Was it great?
was it?
Did I want
It
that?
looked
I mean,
kinda
he's
shitty.
making some
But
okay
when
points.
Biden comes out, you just getting that slow head
well,
shake.
it's like, how do you... What
are you talking
kind of
about?
logic is it to... Like, you have 2,500 peacekeepers, effectively. They're not in armed combat. We hadn't lost a single American life in Afghanistan since February of 2020. So nobody's dying. You got 2,500 people there to like keep the peace, and you need to get everybody else out. Who are the first people you take out? The peacekeepers. Let's get the peacekeepers out of there. We're going to get the peacekeepers out of there first, and then all the regular journalists and the translators and shit, we'll worry about them later.
He just always...
What? That seems weird.
And then get up there and just sick brags.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the biggest airlift in the history of American airlift.
It's not going to look like Saigon.
Yeah.
I promise.
Sick brag.
You thought the Korean War had some airlifts. Boy, let me tell you.
Nobody airlifts like our airlifts. We have the best airlifts.
I feel like he's always behind. You know what I mean? Like, I think, like, same thing with the Afghanistan situation. And they were like, Mr. President, you know that Afghanistan situation is coming up next week. He's like, next week already? Oh, shit.
Shit.
Yeah, pull everybody. Just get them out. Just get them the fuck out. It's like, you want to organize some committees or have some... No, we need to just get this done. You know?
Give him an email 2 weeks out.
I love how they keep
That'll
saying...
justify
The
it.
funniest part about it was that they were like, well, Trump gave us this deal. You know, he worked out this deal with the Taliban. There's nothing we could do. And it's like, what about all the other deals that Trump did that you turned over in the first week? Like, you know, the whole Paris Climate Agreement, that was a deal that he got us out of. You guys were like, no, we're getting back in.
Or let's not act like you didn't know that had to happen for like 6 months. Like, that should have been the first thing on your agenda when you showed up. It's like, all right, how do I make this thing that has to happen in May happen?
Yeah,
but
if you're going to decide not to throw away the deal, then figure out what you're going to do.
Working on doing the goddamn deal.
Instead of doing that, you pushed it back to August.
You know what I'm
You know, you
saying?
called it the Taliban and be like, give me like 60 more days.
Dude,
baby.
I've heard some...
I need a little bit more
I need
time,
a little
baby.
more time to get the U-Haul, baby. Let me just
I've
get my
heard some staunch criticisms. I heard McCarthy get out there and like lay out a little bit about like where the failings were and stuff, and I was like, damn. One of just the biggest ones was the fact that he was like, the Taliban are at their peak fighting in the summertime. Like, literally, this is when they're the most active.
Yep.
Like, why would you withdraw in that time instead of like the winter time? You know, and it's just like he laid out these things logistically that I wouldn't think of because I don't run governments or know how to do a draw out or anything. But it was just like, it seemed like logistically none of that was considered. And that's what I'm saying. Like, as a leader, you know, the last thing you do is just make off the hip fly decisions. You know, like that's the whole thing. Presidents have fucking committees after committees, meetings after meetings, get this person involved. I want to talk to this guy. You know what I mean? Like, get everybody involved who knows anything about this situation, get as much information, then make the best decision. But it's like, same thing with like the pro-choice life comments and stuff. He's just like, just a hot topic, what I gotta say? All right, I'm about to run out here. And like, totally not thinking of future or past, just like, what I gotta do in this moment. You know, it's like he seems like he's just playing catch up.
He's also clinging to this idea that it's like, but I ended the forever war. And it's like, I agree with you ending the forever war. You can fuck up ending the forever war and it still be a problem.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, props to you for getting our soldiers out of Afghanistan, not sending more American people to die. Props, okay? But
Well, actually, based on that context, he didn't do that because he took everybody out. And then it got so fucked up because of the way he took them out that he had to send people back.
Yeah, and then, you know, the 13 dead service members, which is going to bring me to my next point, too. But
what's your next point?
My next point is the checking your watch during the arrival of the 13 dead service members.
He's
now,
busy. He's the president.
I would say...
Catch up. He's behind every time.
You know, this... there's been a lot of like scandals from the Trump administration. There's a lot of scandals from the Obama administration, you know, some more so than others. Trump got impeached twice. Obama wore a tan suit, you know, apples and oranges. But
You're playing basketball.
yeah, like him, like, that's what I do. You know, there's tons of scandals in a presidency. But
Showing
this
up on
Joe
a
Biden
skateboard.
one, you know, it's
I love
like,
how you guys are bringing up like not scandals. You're like,
Well, that's
he
the-
was playing
we're
basketball in
saying
high school, and
controversy,
it's like,
you know, like
what about like the hundreds of thousands of children that were killed in the drone strike?
yeah, but
like that's a scandal.
But what we're saying is what the media makes a scandal.
Yeah.
That's the whole
Yeah,
point.
like
Trump
well,
drinking
yeah.
the water was a scandal.
Like
Obama
getting blown
wearing
behind the podium. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's a scandal.
But that's the joke here is that he's checking. It looks like he's checking his watch, and that's a scandal. And it's
Can I
like,
see video of this?
what if his
think so.
what if his watch is telling him that his insulin's low? Like, you know, like there's so many degrees to like.
But he checked it a lot.
Maybe his insulin was really
And now
low.
look, as far as I'm concerned,
he's
I'm
bored
like,
as fuck.
who gives a shit? Like, I guess like they're you gotta have more respect for the servicemen and shit. And I'm like, but dude, those services are kind of boring.
I mean,
Like, you ever been to a funeral? Like, it's not like a exciting
but, like that's like saying the funeral of my child is really boring.
No,
You know?
I'm making
like,
a joke.
yeah.
It's satire.
Well, like I can speak for personal experience. When there was a body being loaded onto a Black Hawk in Fort Taji, I was in formation, standing at attention, watching the body get loaded up. And if you're in the military, you're standing at attention.
Yeah.
So you're not going to check your watch. So him checking his watch is...
We have a question right here.
Yes, how has the national debt personally...
Spam, look at that.
He's like, hit it with the full...
Woo.
Let me show you my AP.
Mr. Empathy himself, they said. All right.
Yeah.
And I guess it's also just bad timing because he's like, this picture is taken when they're actually unloading the caskets.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's like one thing if like the ceremony is just beginning and you're like, oh, okay, we're still on time. I'm going to make my meeting after this. But like, they're in the thick of it. Like, they're about to do the salute. Everybody's like got their hands over their hearts. They're pulling wrapped up caskets out with American flags on them. And he's like, what time is it?
He's literally just not there. You know,
That's
like,
what it is. He's just not thinking. He's
present. Like, this is the one that I wanted to show that I saw floating around too that I thought was just hilarious.
I'm ready to watch. I haven't seen this. I'm excited to watch this.
A meeting with the Israeli prime minister, and supposedly he fell asleep.
Media outlets and commentators are claiming U.S. President Joe Biden fell asleep during a meeting with the Prime Minister of Israel. But was President Joe Biden so exhausted that he fell asleep during his postponed meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett? A narrative by many Republican-aligned blogs and media sources claim Biden dozed off as Prime Minister Bennett was thanking America for its support. For approximately 60 seconds, Biden bowed his head down as Bennett continued speaking. With his hands folded and his fingers fiddling, it appears that Biden may have heard at least some of what Bennett spoke about because he snapped out of his posture when the Israeli leader finished speaking and attributed the success of the Israeli-American relationship on former U.S. President Barack Obama's qualitative military edge policy for Israel. As far as those who claim Biden was sleeping, well, it's inconclusive at this point. What you can say is that Biden's posture during the meeting was not one of full and utmost respect toward a world leader. Biden should have remained attentive, focused, and establishing eye contact with the foreign leader as he spoke.
That's the I got caught sleeping. Look, bro, I've been in class plenty of times where I've come back and I'm like, who saw me?
Oh, I've got a
Did
great one.
anybody see me? And was I asleep?
I've got a great one. I was in basic training, and I remember before or after, I think it was after dinner, sometimes we would do classroom stuff.
Yeah.
Where right there, next to the DFAC, you'd march over to a classroom. Yep. And it'd be a big-ass classroom with a bunch of tight-ass seats, highly packed together. And sometimes they'd make you watch a boring-ass movie. Sometimes it'd be some shit about land nav. It would just be the most boring shit. Yeah. And we're talking about basic training where you're running around everywhere, you're fucking going to the ranges, and you're also exhausted. So I remember sitting there, they got some shit up on that screen, and I know I can't fall asleep. So I'm trying my best. I'm giving it everything I've got to stay awake. I'm digging my nails into my other nails. I'm racking my knuckles on the wood. I'm pushing as hard as I can. I'm still falling asleep, right? So I remember I was blinking, and you time travel. So you'll blink, and 2 minutes will go by. You'll blink, and it was really you just with your eyes closed. So every time I'm blinking and I'm seeing this drill sergeant, he starts over here in my periphery, and I blink once. He's right over here, and I'm like, that's weird. He's closer. It looks like he might be looking at me. Okay, I gotta pay attention. Oh, blink again. He's right here, and he's just get up and go to the back. And I was like, oh God, I'm in trouble. So I had to get my rifle. I had to go to the back, and he sat me with my back against the wall and my feet splayed, holding my rifle out like this.
He made you do wall sits.
For literally as long as my body could do it until I died. And that's what I remember.
Dude,
but the time traveling of being blink.
But you weren't asleep though.
Oh, I was.
No, but I mean, in your mind, you're
oh, I was not asleep in my mind. No, sir.
Shrine, wake up. And I'm like,
I wasn't.
I'm awake. Sleeping.
Yeah.
I'm awake. And they're like, no, you weren't. You were sleeping. I was like, no,
I'm sitting here.
If I was anybody other than that drill sergeant, I would have been I
blinked.
I blinked.
He was blinking a lot, and he was he looked mad sleep. Now, it's a thing going around. We saw a little couple fact checking things where it was he didn't fall asleep. Right after that, he does talk, respond to the prime minister. The prime minister said something, and he's like, well, thank you very much for your, and he's pretty quick. It's not there's a log awkward
a
pause
delay
or
or
something.
anything.
He hits him. But I'm pretty sure he woke up like 10, 13 seconds before that. Was like, oh shit, like
I need to say something.
yeah, I gotta get like I'm gonna
Yeah,
need to catch
and
up.
I think the issue with this is once again, this video surfaces, and on the internet, people say like, "Oh, it's like he's sleeping. He's asleep." Whether they're joking or they're being serious, and then the media turns it into, "Is it a fact that he's sleeping or not?"
Right.
And it's like that's not actually the issue, because regardless of whether or not he's asleep, he's got terrible posture when it in this.
Shouldn't even look like he's sleeping.
Yeah, the fact that we're even having a discussion that he might be sleeping is the issue.
Imagine
it's not
that-
whether or not he is. The problem is that he's not paying attention, whether it's because he's asleep or
Looking
he's
at
just
his
thinking
watch.
about something else.
Looking at his
he's
watch,
not
whatever.
paying
He's never
attention
there.
to what's going on, and that's what the issue is. It's not about whether he's asleep or not, and
That's
the
why-
media is so
yeah.
good at this. They just fucking
Imagine I did a whole podcast like this.
That's why Trump had pictures. They always had pictures when they would talk to no shit. They would always have pictures in their briefings. And if you watch him when he's with the Saudi, when he's with MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, in that same exact place where he's meeting where Biden's meeting that guy, Trump has got the poster board with the pictures on it, and he's like, "Look at all the millions of dollars of stuff we're gonna give Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
I've got pictures." Because
Right.
if not, he's gonna fall asleep too.
Yeah.
He sits like he's on a toilet.
But most
I love the one where he wouldn't shake Angela Merkel's hand. That was hilarious.
Yeah, that's as much
when
time
Trump
as
was
it-
sitting there and all the people are taking pictures. They're like, handshake, 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 and Trump's just sitting there like this, and Angela keeps looking over at him
Yeah.
like, is he gonna? And then she even leans forward. And she's like, do you want to do the handshake? And he just completely ignores her, like he didn't hear her at all.
The other one's like when they're like going through the doors or whatever, and he's like after you, and he's like no, after you, like cause like
Oh, yeah.
all these like you said, battles, like people are gonna talk about it in the media about like who went in first or who should.
Yeah.
So there's sometimes funny situations where like get in there.
My
Like,
favorite
nah,
is,
fuck you, bitch, you get in there.
get in there. I'm leading
the
you
dominant.
into
Yeah,
this.
I'm leading you.
My absolute favorite presidential one like that is when Trump was walking out during the Republican debates and Ben Carson hadn't heard his name called. So Ben Carson was just awkwardly, the camera could see him, and he was in the little backstage like hallway thing like, I'm waiting for my name to be called. I'm Ben Carson. And Trump walks up and he's like, no?
New Jersey Governor Chris Christie.
Dr. Ben Carson.
Texas Senator Ted Cruz.
Businessman Donald Trump.
Florida Senator Marco Rubio.
Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush.
And Ohio Governor John Kasich.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Republican candidates.
And Dr. Ben Carson, please come out on the stage. He's standing there as well. Dr. Carson.
Okay.
Past him. And then there's just this one empty spot on the podium, and Ben Carson's like, "Yeah," and they're like, and Ben Carson. Quite possibly,
just like when Biden did when he was at G7 and Boris Johnson's talking about, he literally just he's like naming off all the people that are there, and he names the president of South Africa. And then he finishes his little statement, and Joe Biden's like, and the president of South Africa. And Boris Johnson's like, yes, and the president of South Africa, as I just stated. And Biden's like, oh, you said that? He's like, yes, I did.
I'm just telling you,
This
that
is great
old
because
man's not there.
It
dude.
points to what I want to hit on, which is like when we looked at Trump for 4 years, some of us looked at him as unhinged or a little crazy and some
I
sort
definitely
of
saw that.
cognitive
Non-presidential.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
not even just non-presidential, like almost to an extent of danger. Like when he's
Yeah.
talking about the North Korean leader, and
Yep.
he's like, my fucking button's bigger
Yep.
than his. I got a big dick. He's got a little
Crazy.
dick, and it's like
ego
I'm like,
problems.
like, he was like an ego, like he thought he was better than everybody else.
So that was
like,
dangerous,
yeah,
or you could say like, oh, that's unbecoming of the
Disrespectful.
president, anything like that. Now we're looking at Joe Biden, and it's like we can use those same fingers to point at him and say it looks like cognitive decline.
Yeah.
We have numerous examples just this week.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Where it's like his handling of Afghanistan, checking the watch at the ceremony, falling asleep with the Israeli president or the Israeli prime minister.
What was the one that he just did? He's telling some story. I can't remember. I saw it in a video I was watching. He was telling some story about his daughter or something.
My daughter married a Jewish young man, and I dream of every Catholic father that she married a Jewish doctor. But all kidding aside, he did. He's a great surgeon. And they played, and my mind's going blank now. What's the song that is played where everybody is on the chair? Everybody, what I can't remember it anyway. And that's the song that was played. So I don't know what the hell's going on here.
The reason I can't remember it is because he's making no sense
just
at all.
rambling.
He's just saying words, and I'm like, what in the fuck are you talking about?
And
Like,
this
what
was
is he talking about?
In the lead up to his presidency, they kept saying in the media, like, oh, his faux pas, oh, Joe Biden with his gaffes. Oh, gaffy Joe Biden. It's like,
That's why he's in a basement the whole time.
yeah, and it's like, and I'm like, look, you can call this gaffes or whatever, but what it looks like to me is somebody who's like not an effective leader. And I didn't think Trump was an effective leader. Obama had his flaws during his presidency. When I wasn't very political, I would have said he looked like an effective leader. Looking back at his presidency and George W. Bush's presidency, I could look back and say like, the drone thing, the
They did
Afghanistan,
fuck
Iraq
shit.
thing.
They did fuck shit. But like they said, that's more of a policy conversation of like what policies you're enacting, which I can, criticize.
We can have that conversation.
But like never not once did I feel like I could criticize Obama's like character as a president.
I
Like,
trust him in the Oval Office with other foreign leaders.
Oh God, I trust him anyway. Like you said, I'm like when he talked, I was like, I believe you. I don't know. You could be lying to my face, but I believe you.
Yeah.
You know, like when he walked, he commanded rooms. He talked well. He was
just
eloquent.
brimming with charisma.
Yes, just hell of that. But since then, I have not seen that out of either one. Like you said,
George
Trump,
W. Bush really didn't do that well either.
He did, but he
was kind of a doofus.
Bush was kind of like
It was a little
but
bit
he
of a
was
doofus.
like you said, he was.
But it
kinda
wasn't like
a
cognitive
gullible-
decline.
right,
Yeah,
like
he was just like a
you
dumb old
kinda
Texas
cute.
guy.
Yeah, like, you kinda
And I
cute
know
and
many
just
of these dudes.
dude.
Growing up in Texas, George W. Bush
Yeah.
is from Texas.
100%.
The fact that he made it through Skull and Bones, you know what I mean? Like, not only did he make it through Skull and Bones, his the guy who ran against him, John Kerry, was also a Skull and Bones member.
Guy.
So
Yeah.
you had a doofus who made it through Skull and Bones, beat another Skull and Bones guy who served in
Yeah,
Vietnam.
Purple Heart.
How the fuck did that happen?
Well,
man?
John Kerry is an extremely unlikable person.
Yeah,
I liked him. He reminded me of that Urang, from fucking the Mustang. He looked like that, and like that big guy.
That's funny.
But Biden's starting to feel to me like a overcorrection, where it's like, again, what we talked about last time, and this is the kind of Trump effect. It's like
The accordion.
anybody but this guy.
Yeah.
Like not that I don't
Except for
really feel,
Hillary.
but
Hillary's
just barely.
See, this is the thing though, and I love the way I remember Ben Shapiro made this point. He was like, Joe Biden was elected. He said Joe Biden is a houseplant. Joe Biden was elected to be a houseplant. Yeah. What do you know about houseplants? You can go to work. You come home. They're in the same spot. They don't do anything. They're not fucking with anything. They're chill.
They're not gonna wreck
and
your
they're
house.
not extremely crazy. And so that's the whole thing. Like we said, we just had 4 years of this extremely crazy, you didn't know what he was going to do president. And so they wanted somebody who was going to be like, just sit the fuck down and chill the fuck out and don't say anything. Just
and
be here. Just be here so that we can say, look at the president.
That's awesome.
And
for a
he's
house.
like not really doing that.
Not for the
He's
White
like
House.
he's like a houseplant that's like, you know what? I think I might water myself today, and then he floods your whole apartment.
Houseplants are great in the house, but I think the government's more like a car. And houseplants don't drive very well. You know, like he's just asleep at the wheel. And America's just like fucking swerving over the roads.
And in his mind, he's doing great. It's like that episode of The Simpsons where Homer's
like, "We're
asleep driving home, and he's just like,
he's
going on he's like in the rainbows and shit, and then it cuts to the reality. He's just like got a fucking fence hanging off his car.
Dead ass, dude. Dead ass. Because this guy seems to not be there. But like I said, I think like, no, but I can't feel like even going into it. Now you're starting to see the ramifications. We're only like a year in, you know. But even going into it, you didn't get this feeling like Joe Biden was this ultra confident, competent, like awesome. I was gonna say supreme leader, but you probably don't want one of those. But like, you know, he didn't seem like he's gonna be like a good president. You just didn't want that other guy anymore. You just didn't want that other.
I would say he has not like done anything to change my perspective in any way of what I thought he was going to be. I didn't think he was going to come in and like instill socialism. I didn't think he was going to push communist ideals. I didn't think he was going to come in and be as left as he kind of is, but at the same time, he's not enacting any left-leaning things. He's just kind of talking the talk.
Oh, but he is though. Because this thing is we're
the infrastructure bill.
Yeah, we're pursuing yet another multi-trillion-dollar bill into the federal government.
Well, that's the Republicans love to be spending lots of money too.
It was the Senate overwhelmingly approved the $1 trillion infrastructure bill earlier this month in an effort to rebuild the nation's crumbling roads and bridges and found new climate resilience and broadband initiatives. So I guess there's a couple different bills.
So this is the regular infrastructure bill. There is a human infrastructure bill that's $3.5 trillion. And it's very interesting because Joe Manchin was just recently in the news for this because basically what happened was the infrastructure bill for $1 trillion, which is about roads and bridges and broadband and climate change, mostly. That bill, it was agreed, that's a bipartisan bill. And it was agreed, apparently, that they would pass that bill and then the Republicans would help pass the human infrastructure bill.
Right.
Now, it's hard to say what happened in the back dealings with these congressmen and women and the senators and stuff, but that's not really going down the way it was supposed to anymore. Because now, like, people like Joe Manchin are saying, like, I'm not going to vote for this human infrastructure bill, and they need all the votes they can get because they already know that there's a handful of people who are just staunchly not going to vote for it. And so this is creating a very interesting dynamic in Congress with how they're going to go about doing this. Like this, if they pass this, that will bring Biden's spending for this year, just for this year, up to almost $10 trillion.
Yes, sir.
It's insane. It's an insane amount of spending, and he's not even a full year in.
He's going to point to COVID-19. Like, if that's ever
that's why.
They're just going to be like, well,
we were in a pandemic. Yeah, of course. 100%.
Yep.
It's scary to me, though. Like I said, like this just seems like another. I feel like it's gonna go from bad to worse. You know, like that's just me projecting my own idea. I don't know necessarily how governments work and all that, and economics and shit. I try my best, but that seems like a lot of spending in 1 year. You know, for a society that's already afraid of inflation and all these things, to go and spend another whopping $3.5 trillion to more of it, you know, and I'm just like, bruh, like, and then like you said, to see how that money was handled, like when we did all the COVID relief fund and spending, and we broke that down on this show, and we looked at where that money was going.
By the way,
that money remained unspent.
It's still not spent.
So, yeah, you know what I mean? And like going to all types of weird shit, like
that bridge from New York to Canada.
Yeah, there's some
what does that have to do with COVID?
Nothing. Nothing. Absolutely
you couldn't
nothing.
even go to Canada when they passed that.
Absolutely nothing. You're not even allowed to go to Canada.
Yeah, you're still not allowed to go to Canada.
But I mean, I'm just telling you, man, I don't see that this presidency's looking sketch, man. Because like you said, we're only a year.
His approval ratings are the lowest they've ever been.
Really?
I think it's like 43%.
Yeah, I say it.
He's getting down to like Trump levels,
especially on handling the pandemic and withdrawing from Afghanistan. Those are the two issues that are really hurting.
Drop the ball completely. Yeah. And so, I mean, like, what give us some positive headlines. You know what I mean? Like, what's some things that
I've got
Biden's
one.
done that we're
You
like,
got one?
hell yeah.
I've got one. Biden signs an executive order unsealing documents on 9/11.
Oh,
That's my positive
okay,
headline.
okay.
Because old Sleepy
That's
Joe
fire.
came out here and was like, you know what? The people need to know. And
That's-
like my question, the whole reason I bring this up, because it's going to be, these are going to be released. What do you think's in there?
Nothing.
Nothing.
He wouldn't have
let it
released
go
them.
out
Yeah, he
and
wouldn't have
then,
released them
like-
if it was anything.
Because
in
if there was some real shit in there, like there would be some generals in the room being like, "Do not do."
Just think about it. 9/11 is
This probably something he
the
drops the ball.
biggest. Yeah, maybe he like signed
He
the
does
wrong
let
one.
some shit out, and then we're like,
They're gonna get. Yeah, this is like one of those moments when he's at the press conferences and they're like, they're gonna be mad at me, but I'll take your question. Yeah, go ahead. I think that if I'm being honest, I don't think that there's anything groundbreaking. Like, I'm sure that there'll be some insights that we can get to, maybe some things that we thought will be confirmed, but there's not going to be anything groundbreaking that's going to like,
America did it.
well, yeah, that's definitely not going to say that.
We were
well,
in
that
remote
was-
control of the plane.
That was
Yeah.
something, yeah, that was
The-
something that wasn't even
There
written
were
down. So it's
explosions
like,
before the plane. You know what I mean? Like that.
So I
Not
think
written down,
that,
dude.
yeah, like nothing like that's going to come out. And again, just look at the way that they treated Edward Snowden or Julian Assange. Like these are people who put out, compared to 9/11, and the things that people believe about 9/11, it's very mild stuff. Like the NSA spying on you. Like we kind of had this idea that the government was spying on you anyways, but just to hear about the way the NSA was doing it was so crazy. That man is exiled. He can't come back to the country that he was born in. Julian Assange is actively being pursued for extradition from the UK so that he could be tried and held in prison for the rest of his life and or killed by the federal government. And these are people, and he released, some emails about some people.
Yeah, you have Chelsea Manning on that list as well.
Chelsea Manning, who ended up killing herself in prison.
No, she's alive and well.
Wait, who am I thinking of then?
She didn't.
Oh,
kill
I'm
herself.
thinking of the, did the drone strike guy kill himself?
I'm not sure. I know that
One of these whistleblowers killed himself in prison.
Chelsea Manning is the one that released the collateral murder video.
Oh, this is from the,
this is the early WikiLeaks video leak where
yeah.
it showed the
not Benghazi,
Yes, during the Iraq War. It was actually right before we got there for both of our first deployments.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some very sketchy killings.
Yeah.
They shot up the bus shows up to kind of help the guys that they shot up who were like journalists.
Mm-hmm.
And then they light the fucking bus up and there's kids on the bus and it's just completely fucked.
terrible, yeah.
And Chelsea Manning saw that, when she was in military intelligence, copied it to a Lady Gaga CD, a burnt CD that said Lady Gaga on it, and ended up getting it to WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
And, she did time in
Yeah,
jail.
hard
for
time.
that. Hard time.
And so that's what I think. Like, if there's really anything serious in there, he wouldn't let it out.
It's gonna be like when they came out with all their UFO shit, and they're like, "Yeah, we know there's UFOs."
Yeah.
and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm holding out hope. I want them to say their name, Saudi Arabia. I want to see it I want to see it on the page.
Yeah,
That'd be
I want them
nice.
to say the name.
I think that the most damning thing that'll come out of this letting out of the documents is how much of a threat we knew it was before it happened.
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is
And
the
how we
thing that
didn't
they've
take it
always dropped the
seriously.
ball. Yeah,
Stuff
that-
like the
that
Afghanistan
they've-
papers where it just
Right.
really, or the Pentagon papers where it
Yeah.
just points to
Like
like
the fact-
what the fuck
Just
we
supreme
knew.
There was like
negligence.
blaring
Yeah, we
alarms
knew.
going off,
Yeah.
and then they just like, nah, that won't happen.
And then, they'll just come out and be like, well, that's why you have to get completely naked and get irradiated in your whole body to get on a plane now. It's because we're being proactive, unlike when we let 9/11 happen.
That's why when our police pull up beside you in their van, they can scan your van with a fucking X-ray gun, and it's perfectly within the rights of the police to bombard you with UV and X-rays.
Yeah, it's fine. It's like that machine from the original Batman movie,
Yeah.
where it just microwaves all of your water.
You're just sitting in your car and everything just levitates and starts shaking. And you're like,
Man,
why is
it's getting
that
hot
cop
in here.
looking at me all crazy? Your blunt just floats up with you. Oh shit! What's that doing?
Yeah, so I don't think that there's going to be anything really
But
telling
this
in
is
that.
good,
But yeah,
though.
hey, look,
He's
more
throwing
information.
crumbs at the crazy
trying,
conspiracy
yeah.
More
theorists.
information's always a good thing.
Yeah. Maybe he's got the point to. It's more like finger blaming for Afghanistan and shit. Maybe he's
Be like, it wasn't me. See, my name's not in this
That's a
document.
good point. That's a good point because 9/11 is intrinsically linked to our invasion of Afghanistan. And if he points fingers, he's not going to be pointing fingers at himself or the Obama administration. It's going to be pointing fingers at the George W. Bush administration. So,
Yeah.
like, maybe that is part
Take
of that
some of the
plan.
heat off of him and be like, I might have fucked up the withdrawal, but we should have never been there in the first place.
And that's why you know who's behind all this? Kamala.
Yeah.
Kamala's behind it. That's kind of
this made me think of this hilarious meme that I saw one time where it was like the CIA discovers that they've been using black highlighters this entire time. And it's a picture of like a document, and it's got a bunch of blacked out redacted stuff. And I think, was it you that was telling me that you didn't quite get it at first? And I was like, it's because they're using black to mark out the things that they don't want us to know, but that just draws our attention to them.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I heard about this, I was like, man, I wonder if these are going to have anything redacted from it. And I was like, what was that line
that
on
is
page
skeptical.
37 that you guys redacted?
When you open up a page, it's just like hell
black
shit
everywhere. And
you're
it's like
That's why
what exactly are you telling me?
That's why WikiLeaks needs to exist. These places, whistleblowers and things like this, need to
100%.
exist.
Yep.
Because without them, those remain redacted forever.
Yeah.
We don't ever see Fauci's emails. We
Yeah.
don't ever see John Podesta and Hillary, their emails and their doings.
Well, we never did
or their
see those
goings
emails.
on. We didn't see those, but we saw the ones where they're hanging out with Marina Abramovich.
That's
we
true,
saw the
yeah.
ones where they're talking about like, oh, you left a map-related pizza fucking cum stain on my fucking floor. You know what I'm saying? Like, just weird shit that definitely skewed Americans' perspectives leading up to that election.
I still think Pizzagate was just hookers and blow.
I have a great
Like, you can't say that either, you know?
Yeah.
But that's far more likely to be, like, a thing. Like, if this party gonna have pizza, like, yo, we're gonna have fucking bitches and get money in this bitch? Is this gonna be like a Paul Pierce type party? Or is this gonna be
oh, great reference.
Oh, god damn.
Great reference. I think when they say hot dogs, that they're referring to gay prostitutes and that they were trying to get gay prostitutes for Obama. No offense, Obama, but I think you like gay prostitutes. I'm okay with it. So if you want to fuck gay prostitutes, I'm cool with that.
Whatever, dude.
Yeah, but I mean, sex work, you know, there's definitely like you got to work through the muck there, and
Drugs
whether or
and
not that's a good thing or not. But
Because you gotta get money for those things,
I
too.
think that people always pick the weirdest terms to use as like code. Like these rich, affluent politicians are like eating hot dogs.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying like you can't be like a good old like.
But that's skeptical just as anything
That's what I'm
else.
saying. Yeah, like if somebody, like if I was running like a catering company and I found out that the president was gonna hire my catering company and he asked for hot dogs,
gourmet.
yeah. There's only so gourmet. Like
That's the point.
As the more gourmet you make a hot dog, it starts to get into like a bratwurst sausage type situation, which is fine. I can understand if you're gonna have like some sausage hoagie things.
But you got a good point though.
But hot dogs,
that was always gonna draw attention.
yeah, that's why I always thought it was weird that my weed dealer, I've referenced this a couple of times, I think, but you know, like my old weed dealer in Texas used to want me to call them emeralds, and I'm like, so that way the police can think that you're dealing emeralds. Like, what are you talking about, dude? Just give me some fucking weed. Like, nobody gives a shit. Yeah, like what? You pick the weirdest shit to be.
You got any of those sex trafficked kids? You mean weed? just call it weed, man. Just call it fucking weed.
God damn, dude. You're gonna get me fucked up.
God, that's so funny.
You know, Apple scams this shit now.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, we shrieked loud enough. Apple's backtracking on that.
Well, they paused the rollout of it. They haven't backtracked really. They've just kind of stopped in their place.
They heard our criticism on the podcast.
The shrieking minorities were like a little bit annoying.
Yeah.
They were like, it sounds like
started
nails on
ringing
a
in their
chalkboard.
ears
Yeah.
a little bit. Yeah.
Pornhub, or not Pornhub, OnlyFans. were
Yeah, they heard the
dragged
shrieking
in.
voices too.
They were like, no.
That's so funny that like we keep picking these issues and talking about them, and then
And
it's
then
like
immediately,
they're like, sorry guys, we heard the three averagely intelligent Jews roasting
Yeah, are
us
you
about
saying
this.
that there's a little bit of a correlation between what we say on this podcast and what companies and governments do?
I think our finger is on the pulse.
I think so.
They hear our wise criticisms.
We're like the new Tom Brokaw.
Like, I didn't think of it like that, and then they make a new decision. So that's
good.
That's good. I like it. But yeah, I mean, you know, Biden, it's trending downwards for me. We'll see how it turns out. I mean, luckily it's nothing
Not looking
catastrophic. But I'll tell you what, that I think Kamala, she's making that power play.
Oh, absolutely.
Where's she been? Has anybody noticed that
in
she's
the room during the Afghanistan decision? She was the last person. She was like, it was me and Joe in the room, and he made the decision. And I'm like, so Kamala was out here saying this was a good idea too? Like,
I really hope that that's not the Democrats' strategy, that they're gonna like sweep in Kamala to take Joe's place, because people dislike Kamala more than they dislike Joe Biden now, and they dislike him more than they ever have.
Let's not act like they haven't been trying to get a woman president in for a minute.
I mean,
Like,
they have,
really
but they
want-
could. They
got
picked the
black
two
mark. They want
worst.
that white-
They picked the
woman
two
mark.
most unliked female politicians, other than maybe what was that chick from Alaska? Sarah Palin.
Sarah Palin,
They
yeah.
like, other than Sarah Palin, they picked Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris polled at 0% in the primaries.
I gotta admit though, I have never heard of anybody talk about a female politician in like a positive light. Like I've never seen anybody be like, that so and so, she's great. It's like Nancy Pelosi
that's not
trash,
true.
Sarah Palin trash, Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton.
It depends on who you're
Like-
looking at, like who you ask. Like if you ask progressives, AOC, like progressives love AOC.
That's true.
They love Cori Bush. I thought it was
They love
hilarious.
Nina Turner.
They love Nina
AOC.
Turner.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
Jill Stein even.
Jill Stein, Ilhan Omar, she's really popular. So I mean, there's some, but I mean, how many of those people? There's no large scale could run and win presidency women that people are like really gung ho for.
I
thought Tulsi Gabbard maybe, but
Yeah, she did
they
seem
ended
like
up
she had a lot of
they ended
support.
up fucking.
I will
sitting her ass
say
down.
I firmly believe that the addition of Tim Kaine to Hillary's campaign is the one of the main. I mean, there's a lot of reasons: the Comey investigation, talking in front of the Congress, all that shit.
Yeah.
But Tim fucking Kaine, bro,
terrible decision.
link up with Bernie. Just link up with. That's all she had to do.
Yeah.
That's all she had to do. You could have won in a fucking landslide.
Yeah, they really could have.
If Hillary Clinton was like, you know, I had this hard fought battle with Bernie Sanders, but you know what? He's gonna be my VP. Bring him on up here, Bernie. And he came, old man, running up the steps like fucking, like it was
everybody's
fucking
been like-
Price is Right. If it was like Price is Right, like Bernie
It'd be
Sanders.
like bringing a special guest out of the Drake concert, man. They'd have been like,
It's like, oh my God, it's Tory Lanez.
No
Oh
way!
my God, dude, I'm telling you. I am telling you,
Yeah, of
bro.
course.
If it was Bernie Sanders. And that's like, if a dummy like me knows that, then you know that the people upstairs were talking about it. The people that were in power were thinking about it. But they were like, you know what? She can win on her own. Let's just get Tim Kaine in there. And it's like,
Because Tim Kaine's more. Bernie Sanders is gonna rock the boat
oh,
when he gets in there.
He's going to flip the boat.
Wow, I don't know. His actions over the last few years have made
you
me
can't control
doubt
him.
how really about that life Bernie Sanders was.
You couldn't.
Maybe he was more about it back then, but just being Karate Kid leg sweeped two times in a row is like made him. Yeah,
Now he's
made him
sleeping back
like
there.
maybe they finally broken his
Now
spirit.
it's Bernie
but
meme.
he looking real
Meme Bernie.
Democrat recently.
Yeah,
Like
not a lot of independents left.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel what you're saying. But like,
Yeah.
I think at that time, that would have been
oh yeah,
the decisive
I think that
winning
would have
blow.
been, and I think at that time he might have rocked the boat a little bit more, which is why they were like,
Nah.
Which is also, it's also funny that if you look at McCain choosing Sarah Palin as his VP, that's essentially what sunk him.
yeah.
So choosing her and her being incompetent as fuck, I think we can, you know, if you go back and look at the history there of Sarah Palin.
She was
and
like
that
the
run-up-
original Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Oh, not even just that bad. She was like the gaff machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She couldn't name a single newspaper or magazine she read.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're a fucking governor.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
They don't read magazines in Alaska.
Yeah, and then she's talking about like Russia's my neighbor. Like, get the fuck out of here. What the fuck you talking about? Russia's your neighbor.
Yeah.
I
And
mean, if the Republicans have been conspiring for as long as they have, then I could see the Democrats are conspiring to try and get a woman
yeah,
president.
dude,
And they're
Nancy
like, let's
Pelosi's
get this
all over
dude who's
this.
almost dead.
Yep.
He'll make it maybe
Make a bunch
year,
of bad decisions.
maybe 2 years.
Yep.
And then we can just sweep him along. He'll step down due to incompetence. Or like, what happens if you're just too old and incompetent as a president? Like, do you have to be impeached, or does he?
no, they got the
can he
25th
step
Amendment,
down?
but
You can also step
You
down,
can
yeah.
resign, yeah. You can resign.
I think that's what
and
they were going to push for. And
I think that that's what's going to be.
yeah, I think if there's any like if I had to place my bet, like it's too hard of a wager to like really place your bet on because there's like so many possibilities of what could happen. But
He could get assassinated.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot
It's
going
unlikely,
on.
but
I would,
there's a
if
lot
I
of
was
odds.
forced to push my chips in one direction, I'd be like, Biden resigns.
Yeah.
Biden resigns. Kamala
Do you think-
takes over by de facto.
We were talking about this a little bit before we recorded, but do you think he'll make it to the end of this first term?
He'll make it all 4 years.
Like, do you think he'll do one term and like right at the end of his term resign, and then like Kamala, and then we have to like elect Kamala?
within a year of the election?
That's what I was thinking.
Because
too.
he will not run for re-election. That seems like a safe bet.
Yeah.
And I think within like he might even like resign before the end of his presidency. Like it might get to that point.
I think that's
At this point,
I don't think he makes it to the end.
At this point, 4 years is starting to look like a long.
That's a long fucking time. I mean, we're only 100 days in,
Like,
or well, more than 100 days, but
yeah,
we're not even a year in, and this motherfucker's doing all kinds of crazy
And he's
shit.
already falling asleep and tripping and.
He's like Mr. Magoo.
Up.
This is like him becoming Mr. Magoo.
Yeah,
but right before our eyes.
Like another year, another 2 years. I mean, dude, this man's like
it's tough. And we know how much
gonna be showing up in his PJs.
That office ages the fuck out of you.
Yeah, that's what
I mean.
right?
Like, it's not an easy job. So, like,
true.
he's already at this level. Can you imagine
Damn.
what 4 years of the presidency will do to
Yeah,
him?
he's gonna look like Father Time coming. Bitch, like he's gonna be haggard, bro.
I will
Yeah,
say
it's not gonna
this.
look good.
Something I thought was very interesting. People always point to Jill Biden, and say like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, she's his handler and all this other stuff like that." She's going back to working 2 days a week as a community college teacher.
Yeah, I don't think she
So,
does anything.
I don't think she's handling him.
No.
Like I don't see that.
There's a whole organization behind the people that we see in government. Like, it's the same for the Republicans and the Democrats. And this is why, I don't know if you guys have heard anything about the eviction moratorium recently, but obviously the original one expired, and then Cori Bush did that protest where she was sleeping on the House steps for like 5 days until they reinstated an eviction moratorium. And AOC was out there, and a lot of other politicians came out there to kind of like show face and whatnot. And they talked about how they moved mountains, and it was such a big thing after Biden and the CDC extended the moratorium, even though they already knew that the Supreme Court was not going to let that happen because they had already said that. And it's so funny, like Jimmy Dore was pointing out how like none of these people are back on the steps. None of these people are talking about the fact that the eviction moratorium isn't happening anymore. And he was saying like basically what he believes is that they were allowed to do that little protest with the sanction of Pelosi and all the other people that kind of pull the strings behind the Democratic Party because they knew it wasn't actually going to work. And so it's like a nice, like, hey, go throw your progressive fans a bone or two, make them still think that you're with them. Yeah, like it's all good because they need that voting power. Yeah. They need that voting power to keep them getting elected. Mm-hmm. And so if the progressives jump ship from the Democratic Party, it's like
that's some Tea Party shit. Yeah, that would get
it would be
wild.
terrible. Yeah. And so I think that they're all under the boot of the powers that be in those organizations. Unnamed people like that Roger Stone guy. If it wasn't for that documentary, nobody except for people that are in the know in Washington would ever know about Roger Stone and how influential he was to Trump winning the presidency. Yeah. But that's the kind of people. They're not politicians. They're not in corporations. They're just people that work in politics. And these people have so much more say than we ever imagined.
Mm-hmm. Think about how much say the anonymous poster Q had.
What say? I don't think he had much say, actually.
He got 2 people elected to Congress. 2
Did
QAnon. Marjorie, people who are advocates for QAnon. QAnon Republicans.
Okay, but I think you're putting the cart before the horse. I think that the QAnon thing was popular, and so these 2 people who were running for office latched on to that to, it's not like whoever was running the Twitter feed got them elected. I don't know that for sure.
Well, that seems to me very much so that that's what happened. Like,
but
QAnon,
like you're saying that the QAnon person, but this is the difference though. The QAnon movement is a popular movement amongst regular people, and so that is beneficial to attach yourself to that to gain votes. The other side of what we were talking about with Roger Stone, nobody knows who the fuck Roger Stone is. It's not like a movement that you can attach yourself to. We're talking about individuals that have an immense amount of power in government, but that aren't actually in a seat of office or aren't elected.
This was an anonymous person. So this is a single anonymous person who's posting thousands of posts.
Then I would say they have social influence.
They have social influence. They're not influencing politicians other than the fact that they can get people to vote for them.
Like, you remember when Dick Cheney got shot in the ass, Like,
he shot the other guy in the face.
He shot the other guy in the face.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. There was other people hunting with them. I don't know who they are, but you know what I'm saying? Like, there's people,
Political people.
people who hang
Yeah.
out with these motherfuckers that you don't know, and they got their ear or they got their throat. Like you said, some of them, like, I'd definitely be believing in like a world order, like the banks, for instance, you know, and like the Rothschilds, like the people who own the money. I think they go and they step on the politicians' throats and be like, "You gonna do this and that and make this move."
Yeah, it's just like these unnamed people.
Yeah, but
that
there's
have
like,
a lot of influence
it's
to the
same thing
politicians
when we were
themselves.
Talking about this, about whether or not Biden deserved all the criticism for the things that happened, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when I was like, I mean, what about all these committee leaders and people that you do know? They are listed in the White House directory essentially, but
Yeah, they have an office.
Yeah, but they're appointed, so you don't elect them. You have no idea. They probably been there for like 7 years or some shit,
Yeah.
and they run the committee of Afghanistan Foreign National Affairs or some shit, you know, and like these dudes make decisions, like they run shit, you know, and like they have nothing to do with us, which is scary to me because, like I said, you elect a representative who then decides and like appoints other representatives, you know.
Yeah, the
and, like,
majority
those
of the people in government are
who
not
those
elected.
people? Yeah, they're appointed. And, like, who the fuck are those people? You know?
Yeah, well, it's like Steve Bannon being a chief strategist. It's like, this is a guy who has the president's ear and is shaping like the majority of his, policies and his platforms, and he's not elected in any way. And that's
The only reason people know his name is that he happened to be Trump's guy.
Well, Breitbart News, he was a co-founder of Breitbart. So
That's
I mean,
true,
there's he was in, just like Roger Stone. He's in, if you know,
if you know, like Roger Stone was a name around the scene. Yeah.
Well, like if you're in the loop.
But just to kind of hit this fact again though, like without QAnon's posts, Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't come out on Facebook Live and say, "I'm going to go to Congress to fight the satanic pedophile cannibal cults." Like that just doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, we're just talking. We're explaining the same thing, but from different sides.
Yeah,
you're saying from the ground up, from the people, and we're just saying
from this one, what appeared to be one person, whether it was a LARP or a shit post.
But we're talking about the difference of where the influence is. Like the difference is that the person whose posts, like I don't know exactly what it is that you're saying, but I find it hard to believe that the person who was making those posts on Twitter or whatever was then also in communication with Marjorie Taylor Greene, the politician. I think that it's more so the fact that the person who was on QAnon making the posts happened to have a large following.
It's like
and then you can connect a politician can connect themselves to that following to gain votes. Whereas in the Roger Stone situation, Roger Stone is connected directly to the politician and making things happen from that end of the spectrum rather than from the people to the politician.
I recently went kind of deep on the HBO documentary series about QAnon, and it shows nothing exactly definitive, but it looks like both General Flynn and Steve Bannon were in communications and had ties to QAnon, as well as Roger Stone. So we're talking about like, this person might have had the ears of all these people.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they
not
don't.
just the social movement. It's not just like Alex Jones. Like Alex Jones is an example too, where it's like, yeah, he had a massive audience that would shape the culture and would get people to like change their policies and politics based on like that. But he also had direct communication with Trump. He had Trump on his show multiple times. So, the QAnon thing was a cultural influence that could have caused somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene to run under the QAnon banner, but also could have been in direct contact with a lot of these like higher ups in these administrations.
You think
a possibility.
Do you think this Q guy had power? Like,
No.
You think he was a man of influence in
I think he was the
culture,
owner
like,
of the website where Q ended up posting, and that he had convinced a large number of people that are in the know to kind of play along to it because it benefited them so much.
Because to me, I think like when we were talking about it, like politicians, to me, they just lick the finger and they stick it up in the air and they say where I see some influence. Like I feel like me personally, I could come out in the world right now and start the Tasty Freeze movement. Where I'm just like pro Tasty Freeze, and we show up at all the rallies and we're like Tasty Freeze for everybody, right? Like, and we're wearing the shirts. And I think it's only a matter of time. I probably give it like a month, 2 months, depending on how big I get this movement. But say it's 1 million to 5 million strong Tasty Freeze, somebody says Tasty Freeze on a podium. It just happens. You know what I mean? Naturally, you're going to see the shirts. You're going to see the movement. You're going to see it all over Twitter and all over these social media. And you think, why don't I just, like you said, why don't I lump myself in with these guys? It's free votes, you know? Like you said with the progressives. They got to come out and they got to show to their fan base. You got to gather that fan base from somewhere, you know? And if it's as easy as saying, I fuck with Harleys, wear a little Harley patch on your thing, you just got fucking 20,000 Harley votes.
And what I'm saying is the people at the end of that chain, the people who are like, oh, I want those votes, so I'll sign on to that, are the same people that started it.
I could see that.
And if you look at the QAnon thing, it happens right after Pizzagate. Okay. Already General Flynn, Roger Stone, Steve Bannon, they're all against Hillary in the sense of like, if you want to call Hillary a pedophile baby eater, they're going to sign on to that if they don't have to actually sign on to it.
Yeah,
if they can just be like, oh yeah, QAnon, I've heard things. I don't know much about it, but it seems to, like Trump said, he seems to be against pedophilia. I mean, that's a good thing.
Right. I thought that was one of the funniest things he ever fucking said.
Exactly.
When he was like, am I supposed to be against or for those things? I don't understand what you're asking me.
And if QAnon is in control or being controlled to an extent by Steve Bannon and General Flynn, if it's a guy who owns the website where it's being posted and they're literally...
Who's fucking sketch.
I mean, it goes...
That guy was sketch.
Yeah, and both Jim and Ron Watkins, the people who own what was 8chan and became 8kun, it's a lot of evidence points that not only were they fabricating QAnon to essentially
get traffic to their fucking website.
Traffic to their web, basically to shitpost.
Yeah.
But also that they were in contact with these people.
Yeah.
I mean, and it makes perfect fucking sense.
I guess the question really comes down to if they were in contact with these people before or after they started it.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to.
And I would say that Pizzagate being as big as it was and being as amplified as it was in conservative media, they probably saw an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And then within the very early stages, I want to say it's they point to it in the timeline in this documentary about when Q's like voice changed, when he like switched boards and started typing like a different person.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably when it was taken over by.
I think it's pretty funny. Like, I can imagine some like the dudes who own the website like emailing somebody that they have like a friend of a friend knows somebody and like some guy's aide. And he's like, I got this Q idea.
Well, they own a news agency.
Tell you about it.
They own a news agency, and
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, like you can see how the connections are made. I haven't watched the documentary, but I remember Joe Rogan talking about it a lot in his podcast.
It's very interesting.
It seems interesting.
The one thing that leads me to think that could be a scenario is the fact that person's identity still remains obscured.
Yep.
You know? I just have very rarely seen that play out for a long period of time.
The internet's really good at tracking people down.
And people's ego gets involved when things get really.
They want
really
recognition
big,
and shit.
Recognition and credit, like, and so the number of those factors of people pursuing you and wanting to find out, like, I mean, the only Bitcoin. That's like the only thing I can point to where it's like this megalithic thing that's come about and nobody still really knows where it came from. But we were talking about people tracking down the creators of memes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they can do that, how can they not figure out who this person is, you know?
Yeah.
And that would lead me to believe like the person doesn't want to be found out and
has the capabilities to conceal their identity.
And who would be the most likely to be involved in a situation like that? I could see it being a little puppet.
Big
like
Brother's
toy.
watching you.
I very much went from I cannot discredit what QAnon is saying. There's a possibility it could be real, but I'm going to think it's not real because there's a way more possibility that it's not real. I started there, and where I came at the end of this documentary, I was like, bullshit. Absolute. Maybe there is some sex trafficking going on in DC. That's probably likely. But the shit if it's the shit that QAnon was saying, oh my god, dude.
That's like that shit.
Read the post that one time. I was like,
yeah, that's like that shit. What was that thing, the garden or whatever that Alex Jones always talks about? He like infiltrated Bohemian Grove. Yeah, it's like that kind of shit. And I'm like, am I saying that place doesn't exist? No. Am I saying that they do the things that they've been alleged to do? Yes. Like, it's a weird thing because it's like you said, you can take a grain of truth and extrapolate it into a beach of bullshit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you could take a little tiny grain of truth. Do some politicians engage in sex trafficking? Probably.
Are they feeding babies to Moloch? Probably not.
Yeah. Probably like, are they taking these babies after they rape them and then spread their blood on the walls?
Seen that place out there in California and shit where it's like...
What place?
Like...
Moloch place?
Yeah.
I've been down the rabbit hole a few times. I remember when I first found out that, like, it was a real thing. Like in the Old Testament, they mentioned the Canaanites and Moloch and the golden calf. And
How do you say it?
Moloch.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're saying, oh, nice. They got an actual shot of Bohemian Grove and like the owl.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There it is.
Yeah, I listened to a really good in-depth podcast by these guys called Those Conspiracy Guys. It's like an Ireland-based podcast, and they did a deep dive on Bohemian Grove, and there's interviews with staff members. Like, the rabbit hole goes deep because it's a real place and it's a real gathering. Yeah. It's just like the Bilderberg Group. It's just hard to get information about.
Yeah.
And, you know, Alex Jones's famous video, the pictures of the owl.
Yeah, this little owl thing right here, whatever, you can find it on Google Maps. Yeah. Like, and like you can see it, and it's like,
yeah, nobody's discounting the
creepy,
reality of that statue. I think
just what goes on.
Just what goes on there. Yeah, and so it's a lot like the Skull and Bones and Society and all these weird secret societies. Like,
they got 'em,
people
though.
get together and
my
they do
thing
weird
is,
shit. You know, some of them fuck each other with like weird masks on, and some of them is it outside the realm of possibility that a group of people somewhere get together and do fucked up shit to children? No.
Not out of the realm of possibility.
I'd say that's happening. Is it happening as much as other people say it's happening? I have no idea.
I think it makes more sense that the kind of Masonic or pagan belief system infiltrated its way into the early stages of our government.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I see that.
I think if you look at the, there's a great thing I'd love you to Google. If you Google the Washington, D.C. owl outline, it's like when they set up the nation's capital in D.C., when they moved it from Philly, you can't do that by accident. You didn't just do that owl by accident, bro. That's a fucking owl. It's like very obviously an owl. And when you have all of your upper echelon people in Skull and Bones and going to Bohemian Grove and there's all these owl statues, someone slipped in that Easter egg. I'm not saying that all of our government is tied to masonry and
but it just takes one guy, one or two guys. You know?
I mean, somebody
like the land developer
designer,
or whatever. Yeah.
But for me too, I also noticed that like it's easy for humans to create patterns from things. You know, like like you can look at an abstract anything and be like, make a face out of that cloud. Like, is that cloud look like a truck? That cloud.
Sometimes it does look like a truck, though.
No, I feel
you know what I'm saying?
though.
Like that looks like
though.
somebody planned an owl.
But if you had not seen
it
that
looks like
outline
an
for
owl,
you-
but it looks like somebody planned it. How can you tell that from this image?
Well, just the symmetry of it.
and
just
it's a really weird design.
I mean, yeah, it's strangely designed. It doesn't make like any sort of like foot traffic sense or whatever. It's got the 2 feet at the posts with the little tail. I mean, it goes on and on. Like that looks very, very.
But all I'm saying is you can make the statement that based on this image, it looks like an owl. But how could you then extrapolate that to they must have planned it?
Because how else are you going to get it to look that much like an owl without planning it?
Because your brain
You
wants
just
to
lucked
see
out?
an owl. Like,
I'm just saying, like, it takes all of that effort, all of that time, all of that planning, and you just so happen to make a perfect owl at that exact place where the White House and the Capitol building and all that shit is. Like, the literal capital of our...
What came first, the stars or the constellations? You see what I'm saying? Like,
I see what you're saying.
Damn, that's a good
But that's we're talking about something so abstract as the gazillions of stars.
Yeah.
This is not that abstract. This is very,
as a
very
satellite
openly.
image of a city, that's abstract as fuck. That's just as abstract as the
but
stars.
you can look down at any city in America and you're not going to see owls.
That's not true. I bet you
probably
could see a lot of owls.
I
Yeah, like I would.
I'm telling you right now that we can look at the other cities and we're not going to just stumble upon the very obvious owls.
I'd say
at
that
the
it happens a
Capitol
lot
building.
more than you think it
Well,
would
and
because
then
we'd be
look
looking for
at all
owls.
these other things that came up when we're looking at it. This guy says he sees a star. Here's a ship type thing.
Yeah,
Here's
these are
another
much more
stuff.
abstract. That's an owl.
I mean,
Okay, John.
I'm just saying.
You see an owl.
It seems super obvious to me.
Well, when you outline it, yeah.
Yeah. When
When you draw the image of an owl on top of it, it's extremely obvious.
I feel you.
I
but-
see what you're saying, but I'm standing firm in my belief that someone planned that.
Yeah.
I'm
Very
not saying
much
that they
To
didn't.
what extent though? Like just like to just kind of show monument to that.
It's a nod.
owl
For the
god?
same reason that
a
they
nod.
get all of these famous presidents
hasn't this
and
been
news
reworked a
people in
couple
front of an owl statue and burn an effigy because it's some stupid pagan ritual.
I have to look into it more, but I tend to believe in that stuff. Like when we see stuff, because not just this owl, like I see this all the time, and it's like people. We were just talking about this the other day. People forget that your brain is a pattern machine, and so we were talking about with the Trump thing, and they're like, oh, that book was predicted Trump, and it's like, yeah, there's coincidences and there's similarities, sure, but a lot of times people forget the placebo effect, and like you can project onto things. Like I could make a pattern out of this table here, but it could also just be coincidentally.
That's why a lot of the Pizzagate stuff is very obviously just our brain seeing patterns. There's a lot of stuff in that Pizzagate conspiracy where it's just like you're reaching. You know what I'm saying?
And especially when it gets suggestive too. So when somebody says, "That's an owl right there, ain't it?" It's hard to not see an owl at that point. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to be like, nah, I see a horse. Like, you're not looking for anything else at that point.
You're looking to confirm or disconfirm if it's an owl.
Once again, I would say that when it comes to a lot of the pattern recognition stuff, I'm with you. That's an owl. I'm staying firm on that. Like, that is 100% the people who had their hand in creating and designing that knew what they were doing.
I wanted to bring up something that I mentioned in an earlier podcast, which is that it is extremely difficult to have a extended conversation about Joe Biden.
I've thought of that twice while we were talking.
Like, this happened the first time when we tried to talk about Joe Biden. It's just like, you just can't talk about him for very long because there's nothing there to talk about.
It's like a sorcery spell. It's like they put a spell of deflection on his name so that every time you try to talk about him, you're like, yeah, but that Moloch thing.
Yeah, owls in Bohemian Grove.
Owls in Bohemian Grove.
I don't even remember how we got onto that.
Every other politician around him for the last 20 years.
We mentioned Ilhan Omar, Cory Bush.
We were talking about Jeb Bush, George Bush. We talked about all kinds of people.
Just to preface the user, we really were trying to have a conversation about the efficacy of Joe Biden's presidency so far, and that lasted all of about 10 minutes.
Yeah, we tried to talk about the multiple scandals.
Shit's whack, bro.
Yeah,
shit's whack.
I mean, but
whack president.
To bring it back into, put it to bed, honestly, because there's not much more to say. I don't think he makes it the full 4.
I don't think so.
Just as much as John believes he sees an owl, I believe that they planned this. I think that like they were like, let's put a fucking somebody who's on the brink of death right there, and then we can sweep old Kamala in right behind him.
I would tend to agree with that because I understand how much planning and dealing goes on in politics. I just have a very hard time believing, and this is rare for me because you can't discount people's stupidity, but you pick Kamala Harris? Like,
same people that picked Tim Kaine, my man. I'm telling you.
But that's what I'm saying, though. That's what I'm saying. It makes
dummies.
I don't know. It makes me think that there's something I'm missing about that.
Well, yeah, she's doing the deals. You know what I mean? Like, they're gonna put whoever they think, because they don't want just any woman president. They still want a woman president that's
who's gonna
like
do what they want. Yeah. And so I understand that. And that's, I mean, she just nobody likes her. Like,
that's why they didn't. That's why she didn't win. They put her on the undercard.
But that's what I'm saying, though. If that's true, and it's also true that Tim Kaine being picked as Hillary Clinton's running mate was a significant downfall and one of the bigger reasons for her defeat, then that would mean that people hated Trump. And I'm not saying this isn't true, but that would mean that people hated Trump so much that they didn't give a fuck about Kamala Harris being on the ticket. They could have put a wet monkey on that ticket, or like a banana peel could have been the president, and then somebody else could have been the vice president. They were like, yeah, whatever, just not Trump. Like, it doesn't really matter, which I'm not saying isn't the case, but man, people really don't like her.
Well, I mean, how many people fit what Biden said? When Biden comes out and he's like, I'm going to pick a woman of color. Yeah. Okay, like you're saying right
That's
there.
True. There's already
you're
like
saying right there that like, you know, I have a plan.
Condoleezza Rice.
And it does not matter what your qualifications. It doesn't matter like what kind of level of politician you are. As long as you're a woman of color, I'll pick you.
Yeah,
and that was
weird.
such a bad. Even if you were gonna pick Kamala,
just feel like it's more evidence for my.
Yeah, I would have just said like I'm gonna pick the best candidate and then
pick Kamala Harris. Yeah,
it would have set him up so much better.
But they
wanted it as that bonus point. I'm telling you, that's a bonus point for Democrats. You know, it's like they're like, yo,
only
we fuck with black people.
Only the people who don't think deeply and critically. Like that's a very surface level point game.
It's a political bone.
Yeah.
What? That they go after black people?
No, but to state it so, like, you're basically having to explain it for children. Like, I'm picking her because she's black and female.
And they did
just so you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, that just goes to show how dumb they think you are.
Yeah, because they think that's going to
Because you can't say, I'm going to pick the best candidate, and she happens to be a black woman. You can't say that because they might not get it.
They might not get the point. Like they may.
You have to say that she's a black woman, and that's why you picked her, because otherwise you don't get the points.
Classic Joe Biden gaffe.
Because you don't get the points because then they, like you said, they want to know that you're pushing it based on that agenda. Like that's what anybody who would get turned
weird.
on by that.
Yeah.
They want you to do like because there's a lot of people pushing for that agenda these days that you should get things just because you're of color.
It's an agenda of representation, like wanting to see yourself represented.
Yeah,
it's the worst kind of identity politics.
I agree. Well, just because the best candidate should win, regardless.
Yeah. That's why. What was that airline? I can't remember if it was one or two, but like major airlines were like, we're gonna move to like 30% of our pilots being female, and I was like, I don't really give a shit what sex my pilot is or what gender. I don't care who they have sex with, if they're married or not. I don't care if she's had an abortion. Can she fly this plane good?
Because it goes the other way too. Don't be putting shitty pilots in there just because they're dudes. Like I'll fucking be just as pissed at that. You know what I mean? Same thing with politicians or anything. Like
and that's why things like the wage gap between men and women seems so hilarious to me, because it's like, okay, so you're telling me that these extremely abhorrently greedy capitalist corporation leader dudes hate women so much that even though they could make more money by hiring all women and paying them less, they're going to... That's like the one thing that they value more than money is that you're going to have dudes around you. And I was like, that just makes no sense. Like, if that were true, if you really hate all these capitalist fat pigs who only care about profit, then they would hire all women and undercut everybody.
Plus, like you said, those dudes tend to be pigs, so more harassment to get, get your Gucci's on. But
you can't rub asses if they're not in the office.
They're all dudes, you know what I mean? Like, so I will tell you, though, that's where that breaks down, right, is that you have to start with the premise that it's institutionally designed that way. So like you said, you got to start with the fact that they don't want women. Like it's a club, and that's why you would do things like forcefully appoint, or because then you have to break through the what do they call it?
Glass ceiling.
Well, like like when the police have like a cohort, and it's like they got the shield or something, right? Like the blue wall of silence.
Yeah.
Like when you do it on
like
principle,
the thin blue line,
right?
Where it's like they all stand together.
Yeah.
Just on the
so
principle
you have
that
to make it the sense that they are doing it on purpose, like that they're not voting women in because they have a stigma or their purpose, and then that way you have to kind of get around their filibuster type deal. I don't think that's the case, but I just think that's the only reason that you would get into this point where you can't just say, well, let the best win, because if they do have that agenda, then they would never let the best win. And that's what some people believe, which I actually kind of sometimes believe it too, because you can't tell me in all hundreds of years that no women have even how long has it been since women's rights? Like 70 years, something like that. Like you can't.
Well, it's like 100.
Well, the 1950s when they gained the right.
To like
when was women's suffrage?
I thought that was like 20s and 30s.
I thought
it might have gone. It might go as far back as the 30s.
I thought so. We could be wrong. See, this is how little we know about women.
Yeah.
Oh, 1920. Yeah, United States.
Okay.
I thought so. Yeah, it came a few decades before black people.
Really? Okay. So, anyways, but then
white women, of course,
and that was giving them all this stuff, right? Like right to own bank accounts and the whole nine, right? Like made them free and sovereign people. Because I remember there was a lot more than just votes. Like they couldn't own a bank account. They couldn't go to school, I believe, or some shit like that. So
well, yeah, it just depends on the
approval or something.
On the country and the area of the country that you lived in. It's really just depends.
Point being is it's been a long fucking time, and yet we still see this very small substrata of women reaching these things. CEOs.
I think it really hasn't been that long in comparison, though. Like when you think about the centuries, millennia even, of male domination, and then you're gonna turn it all around in 100 years.
But those people are dead, so it's not like like
no. But
it's
not about
an idea that's perpetual.
It's an idea. Yeah, exactly. It's not a, and that's the problem with thinking that they're doing it willingly. Like it's if they are prejudicial against women, to the detriment of their their bottom line, then it's a subconscious thing. Is what I would assume.
And like I think
not all of them, obviously, but to account for, just because, like you said, the amount of underrepresentation of women would lead you to believe that that would have to be, like, the fact that it would be some sort of large, because guys don't like each other. Like, it's not like we're all together because we're dudes. Like, you like dudes that you like, and you fucking hate dudes that you hate. So it's not just a dude thing. It's about what's going on.
The bros, yeah. But bros before hoes, though, that'd be a real thing.
Not all bros.
Well, I would say the same way that we see, and we don't necessarily agree on all this, but the same way that I think that there's echoes within our systems of slavery still oppressing people. Like, I think that you could point towards women and say, that was slavery was 150 years ago. Women's right to vote was only 100 years ago. There might still be some echoes there with them getting into the workforce. I was watching something about Ted Bundy and the woman that he had a relationship with when he started killing people. And she was describing how she moved to Washington as a single mother when she was like 19. And she was like, the only things I could do were secretarial work or nursing or teaching. She was like, those are my three options at the time in 1960. And I'm like...
But she's not representative of all women.
But the point I'm making, though, is that, it even in the 60s women's liberation movement, they were not hiring women CEOs. You know what I'm saying? They weren't in high positions of power within our... corporations. And today that number is still skewed, and it's not because there aren't good women bosses.
Yeah.
It's just things take time to catch up. You know what I mean? Unless you go in there and you legislate like the airlines were doing and say we have to meet a quota.
Just make a rule, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think that's the right way to do it either. I don't think you could just like legislate progress.
No. And I could see it being a subconscious thing, like Mac was saying, you got two candidates or whatever, and there's one male, one female, and they're completely equal in all regards. Besides that, you might subconsciously
depends on who's hiring.
Well, you can make a conscious argument for that.
Like you said, like, how often have you seen a woman president or a woman congresswoman, like that?
Well, no, don't even think about it like that. Think about if you're hiring this woman to be the CEO of your company, the company you own, and she's going up against a male, and like you said, all aspects as the qualifications of their ability to do the job are exactly the same. But one of them has the opportunity to become pregnant and leave work for a number of years to raise that child. Whether or not she will do that is kind of irrelevant when you're making that decision, and if that's playing in your mind. The guy is not going to do that, most likely.
He's a lot
it's a lot less likely for him to be a stay-at-home dad for 4 years.
But you think people add that up, though?
Absolutely.
I was gonna say it's much more likely that he's the guy that's gonna cost your company money because he's gonna fucking sexually harass the
people.
He's gonna end up getting me
or steal. But you know how expensive it is to hire somebody? Like, it's an expensive process to, especially if you're gonna hire somebody for something.
But again, I'm not even talking about hiring necessarily. I'm also talking about voting, though. You know what I mean? Like, we're just talking about like women, because this conversation started with women rising to the elite forms of government, so I mean, voting though too, and I feel you, because that's why a lot of people explain the gender wage gap, right? It's like, well, y'all get pregnant, and so you don't.
Well, that's one aspect, but I think the most cohesive argument would be that women prefer to do different jobs on average.
Sure, but so I mean, I can't imagine them being in a boardroom or something, or even, I'm just trying to imagine myself as a CEO or the owner of a business, and I got these two candidates. I'm not just being like, yeah, but she gonna get pregnant though, so yeah, let's go with the guy. Like,
it's hard to say. It's hard to. I mean, you wouldn't think about that, no. But
it's true.
Or whether or not that would be subconscious. It could be a subconscious thing.
Subconsciously, I just feel like you might just be like I said, I don't even know if you could characterize it necessarily.
Maybe you're thinking like, I'd have more fun playing golf with this guy than this woman.
You know what I mean? Or you just think like, they're not going to Karen me, or you know what I mean? Like, I don't have to listen.
Well, think about it like this. You're one of the Koch brothers. Yeah. Okay. You're one of the most powerful Republican backers, kingmakers in the world. Okay. And you have all these different people running for the Senate and the Republican ticket, and you get to fund any of them to get them in. Are you going to fund all old white guys, or are you going to fund women, right? Well, if you're an old white guy and you control all the strings, look at those Senate Republicans. There's one woman, I think.
I'm not sure.
Out of like the 50 or 51 or 49 or whatever, there's like one woman, and there's like, I want to say like a couple African American men in the Senate. I'm talking specifically about the Senate, not the House of Representatives.
yeah.
That's much more widely diversified on both sides.
There's a lot more people in it.
Yeah, there's a whole lot more people in it. But just based on the Senate,
Yeah.
if you look at the Democratic side, there's a couple ladies, there's a couple lady senators, tons of diversity. You look at the Republican side, it's much less diverse both in gender and in race. And it's like, that's by design, because the people who are putting those people and backing those people and giving millions of dollars to their campaigns so that they can win, because money is free speech in politics. The people who are in control of all that money are the old white guys like the Koch brothers.
Yeah.
But by
And you
design,
like people who are like you. You know what I mean?
yeah, I was gonna say, is it by design because they're old and white, or is it by design that old and white people who grew up in the same generation tend to have the same values?
No, I think it'd be the old and white too, though.
If the Koch brothers were middle-aged black women, we'd see a lot more middle-aged black women Republican
No, I
senators.
kind of get.
But
get with
would
this.
it be because they're middle-aged and black women, or would it be because they have lots of similarities because they grew up in similar situations?
A combination of the two, probably. Like
yeah.
like it's.
I'm
a
not
little
saying
this,
it's
a little
not.
that.
It doesn't have anything to
Because
do
there's
with
old
age
rich
and race.
black dudes too. But you would automatically, and like I said again, to somebody who's not conscious or aware, like you subconsciously feel like I'll have more in common with the white guy than I'll have with the black guy. Same thing when you said like a bunch of women, like because these are people that you're gonna chum with, or you're gonna work with, or you're gonna support, and all these things. Like you brought up a good example. Who am I have more fun with on the golf course?
Yeah.
Who's more likely to like anime?
But that's what I'm saying,
and do
though.
the things that I do.
Those aren't inherently factors of them being old and white, though. That's what I'm saying. I think that we put too much weight on the fact that they're similar in their age and skin color, but we discount all the underlying things that are similar as well.
I would say gender is a huge role.
Rich.
Yeah.
I mean,
rich men.
Yeah, they're not gonna put a poor old white guy in there for sure, but
or a socialist that
So
wants to
you're basically outlining what I'm saying, which is that it has less to do with the fact that they're old and white as to do with they are similar to me.
I would say it's a culmination of all those
which then
factors.
perpetuates constantly old rich white guys because that's the ones that started. So if it's
But it's
old
a
white
completely
guys
different
that
thing to
start
say
the
that it's
picking.
designed by race than by similarities.
I think race is a factor. I don't
It
think
is.
it's designed entirely by race, but it's certainly a factor.
And that was my whole premise of this conversation was, is it consciously or subconsciously decided? So I don't think that we need to make sure old white guys stay in I don't
Senate.
think that's their agenda, but I think subconsciously you just keep picking people that are like you.
Yeah.
And that's going to tend to be old rich white dudes.
Yeah.
Because like I said, there's old rich black dudes, but you might not I don't know how you're vetting them, but you might not feel like you have as much in common.
I mean,
with
shit,
them.
we had
Or
one
with
tiny
white
little break in the 300 years of this country where we didn't have an old rich white guy as the president.
Correct.
And they immediately flipped back to old rich white guys.
They went they rubber banded like a motherfucker.
Like a motherfucker. Two of the oldest presidents we've ever had. And they're also, one of them considered, you could say maybe he's one of the richest. It's hard to say because nobody really knows how much money he has. But And then Joe Biden, who's not broke.
But I guess through this conversation, I could see why there's a substrate of the community that believes that the only way to break that pattern is with direct
Forced
action.
diversity.
Yeah, forced breaking of the action. Because even if we say, well, just pick the best, that's subjective. Who's best is completely subjective.
Best
And
at
then-
what?
Yeah, and then that just tends to lead to picking people like you know what I mean? Like
It
if
also
they asked
discredits
me, they
people
were like, "Who you
yeah.
gonna pick as your best man?" Is in this room. You know what I mean? Like I'm not gonna go out and just pick somebody based on. Well, I mean that's.
I'm going to pick a woman of color.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like,
and that's really going to hurt the chances of someone like Bernie, who seems like he could have been a great leader, but he's an old white Jewish guy.
Yeah.
And he's rich. Don't
and he's
forget the rich.
He's
Yeah,
rich, too.
I mean, yeah, he wrote a couple books. So it's like you look at somebody
got a
like
couple
Bernie.
houses.
Yeah, I mean, if you write a couple books, you might buy a couple houses. You know, like I don't think you could. It's not like
He's not filthy rich.
Yeah, Bernie's not the kind of guy who's like, rules for thee, not for me. Like, he's
Nah,
not
he would
gonna-
pay the taxes.
Yeah, he would pay the taxes. But the
still
point
gonna
about
be
Bernie
rich,
I'm trying to get to is like we're talking about the idea of like a forced diversity or trying to like make sure that we put women or people of color in these positions. It might detract from someone like Bernie where it's like he might be the best candidate. He might be the answer to our problems. He might be the salvation. Not saying he is. I'm saying he
could be.
He could be.
Hey,
and
life's funny, like-
hey, but damn, shucks, he's an old white guy. We can't elect him. You can't run. You're an old white guy. It's like, damn, you might be missing out on the next Roosevelt, the next Eisenhower. You know?
Can you imagine if we had done that with Stephen Hawking? He's a white guy. We can't.
Oh yeah, or like
can't
he
listen
has
to
a
him about black
disability.
holes.
Oh yeah, he has a disability. We can't
Yeah.
listen to him. Or yeah,
He's a fucking weirdo.
But we do this though. Prejudice is a real thing. You know, prejudice always gets put out as like being this thing that you just do on purpose. You know, but you forget that prejudice is also in human nature. Like it's
Well,
in your
prejudice is
nature.
just inherent in any decision because
Right.
prejudice just means to prejudge something.
Right.
And you never have all the information about anything, so you're always prejudging.
And you always have a fear brain, and the fear brain is afraid of things that are not
Like you.
and normal and comfortable.
Because
and
back in the day when
well-known.
your fear brain was being developed, people not like you killed you.
yeah, it's true.
yeah. Those
And so-
Neanderthals would just beat and rape you to death.
Yeah,
They could definitely do that.
Yeah, so it's like we have to unlearn evolution, basically.
Yeah, really, it's a really tough. But like I said, I could see how you could just be like, you know what? This year we're wiping the slate clean. We're starting new. Everybody in, get the fuck out. We're putting all brand new. It's 50% this, 50% that, whatever, and then let it unwind as it goes down.
Term limits for Congress, more rotations in the Supreme Court. I don't think that either one of them should be fucking for life. Now, Supreme Court is for life, but I don't think it should be.
But I do like the way that they try and keep it staggered, though.
I don't know. I mean, obviously, I'm not the game maker, so I don't get to decide.
Yeah.
But I just look at, especially Congress, and they don't have fucking term limits.
Yeah.
So you can be in Congress your entire
Entire
life.
existence,
You can get fucking
But you do have
voted
to be
in.
reelected.
That's the thing, though. If you
Like,
are
it's
the
one
one
thing
who-
for the
if
Supreme
you're-
Court where, like, you just get appointed once
Yes.
and then it's done.
But if you're literally drawing the districts, like if you get in there and then you rig the game so that you win, you're
Yeah.
still cheating.
It's worse.
I'm
to
not
me
saying it's
that
not
all
cheating,
those
yeah.
guys, like I told you, who are in committees and everything else that just get appointed. You know, because then at least you're the dummy that keeps reelecting
The
these fools,
Faucis
you know?
and the
but
Romneys,
yeah, like
yeah.
those dudes are making just as many, if not more, decisions than your Delaware state senator is, and yet those motherfuckers be appointed for God knows how long.
James Comey made a lot of
generals,
decisions.
5-star generals that are the reason you go to war. You know what I mean? These guys are the guys that are feeding you into and deciding, Mr. President, I think we should go to war. And you didn't get no say in that, dude. You have no idea what that dude is about.
You didn't vote that general.
You don't even know his name. You don't even fucking know his
Our
name.
system is so weird. We're picking people to pick people to make decisions.
Yeah.
For us.
Yeah.
For everybody.
Instead of voting on the decisions.
Yeah.
Makes no
It's
sense.
tough.
Because like 70% of America wanted out of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
But if you had given us the choice of how to get out of Afghanistan, nobody would have voted for the way that we did
Damn,
it.
dude, could you imagine a pure democracy? You know what I mean? Like,
I
and
mean,
now with the invention of
tough.
Bitcoin,
I think there would be way less people voting. Because, you know,
insane.
you already, like, the amount of information that you need to have to make what most people would
clear
consider like a educated vote on a politician is already more than a lot of people would do.
Yeah.
And so like now you have to know about specific policies. When we like, I mean, I brought it up earlier about the abortion topic, but some people are like one issue voters. They don't care what you're going to do with the economy.
Yeah.
They don't care. Can I have an abortion or not?
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to vote on based.
True.
And so it's like when you get to that level of participation in the political system, the idea of a pure democracy where you vote on everything that's going to happen, that just goes
How
right
much
out
do
the
you
window.
zoom in too? Because like, are you going all the way to like zoning laws? Like,
Exactly.
are we gonna vote about like whether or not that Sam's Club could put on an
You
addition?
don't have to vote. It's not like they're putting a gun in your head and be like, make sure you're there to vote for every single thing. But having the option, and then what if we carved out a quarter of the Senate? Damn, we got to do this podcast sometime. Carve out a quarter of the Senate and then slip that in as like the people's vote. So the people, every time a bill comes up, every time a zoning, anything that comes up, you can vote. Don't have to. It's not required, but you can vote. And if that vote is in one way or the other, you have to cast 12 electoral votes towards that.
Robot senators,
So that the people, you know what I mean? The
because
people
they'll count the vote. Like if we have a representative that's just counting all of our votes as the population and our decisions, just make them a robot.
But you're not now because, like I said, it's on Ethereum. You see what I'm saying? We can tell if you fucking fucked our vote. It's right there on the blockchain.
It's right there on the blockchain.
You know what I mean? Everybody can see it. Dude, we got some tools now that when our government was designed, it didn't exist. You know?
wouldn't need executive orders saying, FBI, take a look at some classified documents and see if you could declassify anything, because it'd be all in the blockchain.
Yeah, we'd be able to just see it right there.
Free and open information sharing. I remember having this conversation while I was walking around the backyard of my mother's house with you, where I was like, the blockchain of information. Can you imagine if everybody just could look up how to do a surgery? Just had access to every medical book or all the information that's out there we could just access.
Which we do. It's called the internet.
Well, to an extent. I mean, there's proprietal information.
Oh, okay.
So I'm talking about
paywalls and
there's
stuff,
paywalls,
too.
proprietal information. It's kind of like with art. Like if all Adobe programs were free, how much more artists would there be?
Yeah,
That's a good point.
tons.
You see what I'm saying? So if you do that with information and you do that on the blockchain,
That's true.
I was
bad idea.
fucking freaking out. I was screaming at you on the
I
phone.
love
I
it.
remember this conversation because I don't know if you do, but I was like, it's the blockchain.
The blockchain's really the sauce. Like,
It's the sauce.
Like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are cool, but it's the blockchain for me.
I gotta put a cap on us, boys, because I feel like we just burned through like 6
Yeah.
months worth of topics. Right there. Like, there's so many things that,
Yeah.
like, everything that we hit on, like, could be a whole nother
whole
episode.
episode.
We got 20 minutes of Joe Biden. It's about what to be expected.
Yeah, I don't even know what we're gonna call that section.
Joe Biden and things.
Thank you, Rod. We appreciate your input. Will be Joe Biden and things.
Dude, Joe Biden potpourri.
That's funny.
It's like a Joe Biden trail mix.
Things that we can loosely attach to Joe Biden's
Yeah.
presidency.
we call it, you know, abortion, Biden, miscellaneous, etc.
Biden is the 7
Abortion,
almonds in our
Biden,
bag of trail
etc.
mix.
Everything bagel, yeah.
God damn, that's funny.
We tried, but hey, I had fun though. I mean, honestly, like whether or not we stayed on topic this time, I think we covered some serious topics. I was like,
It's good.
shit, didn't think of that.
Yeah,
Because
Yeah,
that's fun.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to slap an intro on there?
We should probably do an outro too.
We could do an outro.
Yeah, so anyways, we've talked about a lot of different things in the second section of today's episode. Not quite the plan, but I think it was good. You know, you can let us know down in the comments if you enjoyed that short shotgun type episode.
Yeah.
But we appreciate you spending your time with us and investing your energy in what we have to say. Because we are averagely intelligent, and there's no reason why you should be listening to us.
Comment.
Yes.
Flame me in the
Yes,
comments.
Give us
make
your
fun of us,
intelligence,
please, for the love of God.
Yes.
Tell us what you think. We want this platform to be more about engaging as we progress and go through the years. You know, it's not just about us. We want to hear your thoughts, because that's kind of the whole idea of the show. Is it's regular people talking about this stuff. It's one thing to have an expert on and that you interview about their topic, but to just sit down with some regular people and be like, what are your opinions on these really difficult topics?
Yeah, I wouldn't even mind, you know, like you said, reading some of those or bringing some of those comments onto the show. So we can't do that without them. So send them. Send them
our way.
Maybe we'll make
And
them on the show.
we'll get you on there. And until then, we will catch you next time.
Yeah.
Peace.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any